Chilling tales for dark nights.
Want to make sure you never miss a Chilling Tales for Dark Nights video again? Be sure to subscribe and hit that bell to turn on notifications.
It was a dark New England night. Even in the clear, there was no moon. But the road that wound through the woods had so much tree cover that even starlight had no chance of shining through. Nor were there any streetlights on a road this isolated. And as for signs of civilization, Christopher Fell had seen only a few houses during his drive. And those were few far between and tended to be either in the distance or hidden behind trees that surrounded him. He had his headlights, of course, and they were working fine enough. But outside of their limited scope, the world seemed to be made of black. Normally, driving at night didn't bother Christopher in the slightest. He was used to it, actually preferred it to the busy traffic and glaring sunlight of daytime drives. Christopher had never been much of a sunshine person, much to the amusement of the friends and relatives who liked to jokingly call him a vampire. He was no vampire, of course, but that didn't stop his friends from making fun of his night job and his resulting tendency to sleep during the day. Christopher himself was alternately amused and annoyed by the vampire jokes, but, and here I realize I may have strayed from the story a bit, the point is that Christopher was used to driving at night. Normally, it would not be an issue. But Christopher was also used to driving through the suburbs, not through such a wooded area, where there were no other light sources at all. Christopher was also used to driving while much more alert than he was right now. He had been up all Friday night at his security job, and then been struck by an annoying but not unfamiliar bout of insomnia during the day, unable to sleep so much as a wink. He really should have begged off when his buddy Frankie had suggested going to a party at Frankie's cousin's house the following night, or at least made sure to get a nap in, or something. But Christopher had no idea that Frankie's cousin lived so far from town, but perhaps even if he had known, he might have still agreed to go to the party, for he had felt surprisingly alert on Saturday evening, despite the fact that he hadn't slept since Friday afternoon. Now driving home from the party, down the dark, winding road in the middle of nowhere, Christopher glanced at the clock on the dashboard and saw that it was now 2 o'clock in the morning. He did a bit of calculation and realized it had been roughly 33 hours or so since he last slept. Can that be right? He thought. Let me see. I woke up Friday afternoon at about 5 p.m., went to work all night, couldn't sleep all day, went to the party went late. Yep, a bit over 30 hours. Oh, no wonder I'm wiped. He still felt safe to drive, but his eyes felt awfully heavy, and Christopher, perhaps a bit more desperate than he realized, rationalized. If I close my eyes for just a moment, that might be all I need. Not even 10 seconds, just a moment. After all, the woods, which had been remarkably thick, were clearing up ahead. They rather suddenly stopped, in fact, revealing nothing but large meadows on either side of the road. Christopher was still debating on whether to rest his eyes for a moment, when his eyes, rather involuntarily, made the decision for him. He didn't exactly doze off, but he did close his eyes. Christopher would later swear it was just for a moment. He was startled awake. No, not awake. That would imply he had fallen asleep for a moment. And Christopher just would not admit that was so, when the car hit a surprisingly severe bump in the road just as his car was emerging from the woods. The steering wheel suddenly jerked to the right, almost as if in protest to whatever the car had rolled over on the street, and Christopher suddenly found himself driving on the grass on the side of the road. Christopher tried to compensate by jerking the wheel back to the left, but before he could act, he was distracted by a flash of movement. At first, he didn't know what it was, and the next thing he knew, the car slammed into a tree in the meadow. Christopher was thrust forward, his life undoubtedly saved by his seatbelt, but his head slamming into the top of the steering wheel. "Son of a bitch!" Christopher exclaimed. Dazed, he looked at the driver's side and passenger windows and saw that, as far as Christopher could see in the darkness, he had struck the one and only tree in the entire meadow. If his car had gone in any other direction at all, he would have been absolutely fine. "Just my damn luck," Christopher griped. He supposed he could just drive off. He didn't think the car was damaged that badly, although there was surely a nasty dent in the front. But his curiosity got the better of him, and he wanted to visually inspect just how bad it was. He turned the ignition off and removed his flashlight from the glove compartment. He opened the door and stepped out of the car. An instant before, he shone his light towards the point of impact between the car and the tree. He suddenly remembered that he had seen a flash of movement just before the collision, and for a moment, he wondered if he had hit a deer. Then, his mind finally clicked into operation, and he realized what he was looking at. A person. He had hit a person. Pinned between the car and the tree, at an angle that somehow hadn't been visible from the front seat, was a young man, not much older than a teenager. Without thinking, Christopher instinctively gave the car a good shove, and perhaps he had accidentally put the car into neutral at some point during the accident. That was somehow enough to move the car a foot or two away from the tree, just enough to allow the man that had been pinned to tumble to the ground. From his prone position on the ground, the young man's eyes rolled to look up at Christopher.
"Well,"
the young man said, eerily not moving a muscle other than his mouth when he talked.
"Well, looks like I'm dead. And not to sound harsh or anything, but yeah, it's your fault. You killed me. I'm sure it was an accident, but yeah, I'm dead. And yeah, you're the one to blame, no two ways about it."
No, Christopher replied, in both disagreement and panic. "No, you're all right. You're fine. Of course you're not dead, or you couldn't be talking. Don't worry. You're gonna be okay. I'll get help."
"Sorry, bub, but yes, I am dead. Check my pulse if you don't believe me. Not sure about the talking. Maybe that's only your imagination fueled by a guilty conscience. Or maybe it's something supernatural. I don't know. The first explanation is usually the best."
"This is insane," Christopher protested. The man claiming to be dead finally moved something other than his eyes and his mouth. He raised an arm, as if in defiant offer for Christopher to feel his pulse. Christopher took the man's wrist, and sure enough, couldn't find a pulse at all. "Doesn't mean anything," Christopher declared, quickly letting go of the man's wrist and allowing the man's arm to clumsily plop to the ground. Christopher squatted down and put 2 fingers on the man's neck, like he'd seen people do in the movies. No evident pulse there either.
"Told you, I'm dead."
"This is impossible," Christopher insisted. "It can't be happening."
"Afraid it is, friend. Listen, I don't hold a grudge. I know it was your fault, but I have no doubt in my mind you didn't mean to hit me."
I didn't, I swear. I was just so tired, and the car hit a bump in the road, and I lost control only for a moment. And what are you doing out here in the dark in the middle of nowhere anyway?"
"I like to wander outside at night and do some stargazing,"
the dead man explained.
"It's not the middle of nowhere from my perspective. You probably can't see it from here, what with the lights off and all, but my house is just beyond the tree line on the far side of this meadow. This meadow is more or less my backyard, I guess you could say."
"This is madness," Christopher insisted. You can't be dead if you're talking to me.
Oh, look, let's not get into that again. I don't know the reason for why it's possible, and do you really even care? I'm dead, and I wish I wasn't, but it's too late for that. You've got to do something about it.
I'll call the police, Christopher said, reaching into his pocket to retrieve his cell phone. He pulled his phone out and hurriedly entered his password to turn on the screen, but before he could start dialing 911, the dead man protested.
What, are you crazy? I'm already dead. There's nothing you can do about that now. Listen, if you calling the police could somehow do me any good whatsoever, yeah, I'd want you to call them, right here, right now. But what good is that going to do?
Well, but it's the right thing to do, Christopher pointed out.
By the strictest rules of law, huh? And maybe, I say maybe, by the strictest rules of morality, I suppose you could argue that it's the right thing to do, but again, what good is it going to do either of us? Look, do you like your life? I mean, are you happy? I don't mean right now, of course, this is a terrible time, I know, but I mean, in general, are you happy?
Well, Christopher said, hesitating, thrown off by this sudden change in the conversation's direction. I don't know about happiness. I guess I'm not exactly unhappy. I'm content. I guess it's the most accurate way of putting it.
Okay. And what's going to happen to that content little life if you call the police? Just stop and think a bit. What's going to happen in the aftermath?
But what are you saying? Christopher demanded. I can't just drive off.
No.
The dead man admitted.
With that, I agree. You gotta hide the evidence.
Are you insane? Christopher protested.
Look,
the dead man continued.
I don't think there's any blood on the car. Sure, a dent where the car hit the tree, but no evidence that you actually hit a human being. But if you just drive off, even on a road this isolated, someone's eventually going to drive by and see a dead body by the side of the road. That's going to raise questions. The police are good at this kind of thing. They find a dead body, trust me, sooner or later, they're going to find a way to track down the killer. You have to hide the body.
I can't believe this.
Believe it,
the dead man said.
I'm telling you this for your own good. Again, if calling the police or letting my body be discovered could do me any good, I wouldn't be giving you this advice, but face the facts, man. Hide the body or your life is over as you know it.
How am I supposed to hide a body? Christopher demanded.
First things first. Grab my wallet. It's in my front right pocket. Well, left pocket from your current angle.
Why do I need your wallet? Christopher asked, more confused than ever.
2 reasons,
the dead man responded.
First, I can't have you continuing to think of me only as the dead man. It's insulting. I have a name, you know, but you'll never know what it is if you don't check. Second, there might be some cash in there. I don't remember, but this has turned into a hell of a bad night for both of us, and you might as well get something out of it.
Christopher saw the logic in the dead man's reasoning. So he fished the wallet out of the dead man's pocket and flipped it open to see a driver's license and the flashlight's beam. Matthew Edwards, Christopher read out loud.
Just Matt is fine.
Okay, Matt, Christopher said, casually taking a wad of bills out of the wallet and stuffing them into his own pocket. How do you propose I hide a body?
I don't suppose you have a shovel in the trunk of your car by any chance?
Matt asked. No, Christopher said, feeling inadequate for not having the shovel.
Too bad,
Matt said, clearly disappointed.
Well, next best thing, drag me over to those woods over there. Out here in the meadow, I'm out in the open. Anyone passing by would clearly see me. Drag me deep enough into those woods. It'll be easy to hide me in the underbrush. You wouldn't even have to bury me. Nobody ever goes into those woods, except to occasionally drive on the through road. Just drag me far enough from the road so that no one can see it from there.
Well, you were out here, wandering around, Christopher pointed out. If you were out here, doesn't it stand to reason that somebody else...
No, man.
Matt disagreed.
Listen, I know this whole area like the back of my hand. The closest neighbor is like a mile away. Even if they like to wander around outside, they're almost certainly not going to wander this far out. I'm telling you, hiding me in the bushes in the woods will be enough. It'll be fine.
Christopher sighed, but supposed that Matt was right. He grabbed Matt's limp body under the arms and dragged him towards the woods.
You know, this being dead thing's really not so bad.
Matt said out loud, but more to himself than to Christopher.
I never really thought about it before, but now that I'm dead, I don't see what the big deal is. This is what everyone's so scared of? It's actually pretty relaxing. No responsibilities, no worries. Hell, I don't even have to move.
I guess you couldn't even if you wanted to, Christopher replied.
True, that's true,
Matt said with a laugh. The further they got from the glare of the car's headlights, the harder it was for Christopher to see. But he eventually got to the tree line and re-entered the woods he had just driven out of. He knew this less from what little he could see, and more from the fact that he could now feel plants and weeds scraping at his sides of his legs, and could hear the crunch and rustle of dead leaves under his feet. He continued to drag Matt's body deeper into the woods until he started to get out of breath from the effort.
That's all right,
Matt said good-naturedly, as if he could sense that Christopher was starting to get tired.
This should be far enough. There's no way anyone will find me now.
Okay, if you think so, Christopher said. He hesitated for a moment, but couldn't quite figure out why. So he let go of the body, and Matt fell to the ground with a quiet thump. Now what?
Well,
Matt said, clearly taking the time to consider his answer.
I guess that's it.
That's it? Christopher repeated, still trying to process everything.
Yeah,
Matt said, now with more confidence.
Nothing else really to do, I guess. Might as well go on your way.
So, Christopher said, still hesitant to leave, and still not quite sure why. I guess this is goodbye.
Bye, Chris,
Matt said.
Take good care of yourself. Drive safe.
You too, Christopher said before realizing how stupid that sounded. I mean, you know. Bye. Christopher wasn't sure in the dark, but he thought he saw Matt give a friendly little wave of his hand. Christopher waved back, feeling foolish for doing so, but hey, it was an awkward situation. He walked back to the car, shone his light on the front again, and decided that his original determination had been right. The car really wasn't hurt that bad at all. Dented, but still easily drivable. He got in his car, closed the door, turned off the flashlight, and put it back in the glove compartment. He drove for another half hour or so, sometimes in silence, sometimes with the radio on. Gradually, signs of civilization started showing up. A crossroad here, a house, or some other building there. Eventually, he arrived back in town. He pulled into the parking lot of one of the very few public buildings open this time of night, the local police station. He had made a decision during the drive home. He would turn in the dead man's wallet. He would claim that he found it by the side of the road or something, if anybody even asked. It was a small gesture, but he figured it was the least he could do. "Good evening," Christopher said to the officer on duty at the front desk. "I was driving home tonight and I saw this wallet on the side of the road. I didn't feel it would be right to drive up to the house in the middle of the night, so I thought I'd return it here."
"I'll take it and have a patrol car drive it over to whoever owns it in the morning,"
the officer said. Christopher handed the wallet over and took his cell phone out to type his address into the GPS. At some point during all the excitement of the evening, the GPS function had somehow turned off, but it had now been a very long time since he'd slept. His eyesight was blurry and his mind just wasn't thinking right. "Do you know how to access GPS on a smartphone?" Christopher asked the police officer. "I just can't get my mind working right now."
"Are you sure you should be driving?"
the officer asked, giving Christopher a stern look of warning. But still, he reached out a friendly hand and took the phone to try and figure it out.
"Hey, did you know your phone is in record mode? You've got a really long video on here."
What? Christopher said, barely understanding the officer's question. All Christopher knew was that he was, no pun intended, dead tired. He just wanted to sleep.
Yeah, here, see?
The officer said, pointing the video out.
You've been recording everything for God knows how long.
To prove what he was saying, the officer hit the play button, expecting to see the usual meaningless shaky cam visuals that occur when someone accidentally turns on their phone. The officer was shocked to see what looked like a dead body lying between a tree and a car. And this is what both the officer and Christopher heard on the recording.
Well, but it's the right thing to do.
Christopher pointed out to Matt on the recording. No voice responded. Indeed, all they could hear was Christopher talking to himself.
Well,
Christopher's voice continued on the recording.
I don't know about happy. I guess I'm not exactly unhappy. I'm content. I guess that's the most accurate way of putting it. But what are you saying? I can't just drive off. Are you insane? I can't believe this. How am I supposed to hide a body? Why do I need your wallet? Matthew Edwards. Okay, Matt, how do you propose I hide a body?
The police officer turned the sound off and glared at Christopher.
What the hell is this? 'Cause I'll tell you what it looks like. It looks like you hit somebody with your car and then recorded a confession. So what the hell is going on here?
He actually proposed a couple of different possibilities, Christopher explained. First, he said it might be my guilty conscience talking to me. That was his first possible explanation. And he said, the first explanation is usually the best.
I'm insane. Please, just tell me I'm insane. Please, tell me that I'm a delusional freak who deserves to be locked up. Hell, call me a schizohead or a psychomaniac. Fucking anything. Just for the love of God, tell me this isn't real. If it is, I don't know what I'll do. It's been going on for almost 2.5 months now. At least since Jackie died. Jacqueline, the girl I took under my wing. The girl I let down and now the source of my torment. We'd met about 1.5 months ago, and I was still working a dead-end job as a cook for Porky Brothers, the old barbecue joint that sat in the middle of town, where I lived before it closed down last week. I still remember how we met. I was out back having a smoke, the only one I'd had so far that day. I'd just about gotten into a fist fight with Rick, one of the waiters, who always particularly disliked me for whatever reason. The guy seemed to amuse himself by trying to crack a bullwhip over my back to hurry up with an order. And of course, when a customer would complain about something being wrong with the food, be it not seasoned enough or something was still cold, you can bet your bottom fucking dollar the son of a bitch would be in my ear about it. That time was over the order being 3 minutes late, even though we were getting slammed with business and I barely had any help with multiple people calling out. I was already tired from having to pull a double, and I'd been putting up with this shit for far longer than I ever should have, and I was about to break his face in when Wendell, my buddy, and one of the only other cooks working with me that day, stepped in and told me to go take a smoke. So I did, without a single word. So there I was, puffing away at a Marlboro Red, when she approached me for the first time. I could tell she'd been crying and her clothes were torn and raggedy. Can I bum a smoke? She asked, her voice shaking. I looked in the pack, seeing that there was only one left, after the one I was smoking. Admittedly, I almost told her no. Looking at her, though, I guess at the time I didn't have the heart. Thank you. She just stood next to me, silently dragging on her smoke. Part of me wanted to ask if she was okay, but at the same time, I knew she wasn't. The way she looked said everything. Tattered clothes, the way she was quivering, still in tears, and just how utterly frightened she was. Plus, I could see bruises on her cheekbones and around her mouth. I was heartbroken. I must have somehow shown it, too, because she soon told me that it was nothing, just an accident. Accident, my ass. She shrunk a bit before taking another drag. She told me that it was just a misunderstanding, that it wouldn't happen again. I was becoming enraged. I wasn't a saint, sure, but damn it, I was raised to believe that no matter what, a man doesn't put hands on a woman like that. I wanted to find and hand this piece of shit his ass on a platter before putting him down like the animal he was. What happened? Why'd he do it? I finally managed to ask. She shook her head. Look, don't worry about it, okay? You wouldn't get it anyway. I think I get it perfectly well. Some bastard just beat the hell out of you, and you're afraid of getting him in trouble by telling me who he is. Oh, yeah, she scoffed. And what are you gonna do, huh? Kick his ass? Why not? At least then I can kick someone's ass today. This made her chuckle. Bad day, huh? Look who's talking. This time we both laughed. Name's Otto, by the way. Jacqueline, she said, her voice sounding just a little less timid. She flicked her cigarette out before thanking me and turning to leave. Hold up! I shot my hand out to her, stopping her. I pulled out one of the order tickets I'd crumpled up earlier out of anger and scrawled out my phone number. Call me later, okay? She looked at it and then at me, smiling. You got it. She then turned and left, and I went back inside to continue torturing myself with the rest of the shift. That night, when I finally got home, at 1:45 a.m., having to close the kitchen, I was grabbing a beer from the fridge when my phone buzzed with a text message. Hey, it's me, Jacqueline. I just want to say thanks for talking to me and letting me bum a smoke. It really made my day better. I smiled, something I hadn't done all day, or all week for that matter, and replied that I was glad I had made somebody happy today. I also texted her that if she wanted to talk about anything, that I'd be there. After that, there was no reply for a while, so I decided to proceed with drinking myself to sleep that night. When I woke up the next morning, by that I really mean about a half hour into noon, I found that there were a couple of texts from her waiting for me. The first one was only about 3 hours after the one I sent her. That would be nice. Thank you. There were 2 others sent about another hour after that one, only each about 10 minutes or so apart from each other. Hey, you still up? I'm kind of scared here. Can we please talk? My eyes snapped wide when I saw this. I felt my heart drop. The timestamp for these messages had been from 5 hours ago when I was asleep. She needed me and I wasn't there. Immediately, I shot her a text saying that I was sorry I didn't see her messages and asked if she was okay. My heart was racing, waiting, praying for a response. Finally, about 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed with a response. Hey, it's fine, everything's okay. Sorry for worrying you. My heart slowly returned to normal. At least she's alive. I asked her what happened and if she was hurt. She replied that she was all right and that she was overreacting. Though I was relieved that she was okay for now, I wasn't convinced that she was just overreacting. Look, I'm no kind of trauma counselor or psychologist, but I wasn't born yesterday either. I'd seen before where I'd see friends of mine looking like Jackie did, with bruises, cuts, and black eyes covering them after their pieces of shit boyfriends would come home, usually sloshed, with some wild hair in their asses. Every time, they too would try to pass it off as Something like overreacting, or just an accident, or not what it looked like. I decided to ask if she was open for lunch that afternoon, since I was off work. She replied that she was busy, but that dinner might be an option. I told her that'd be great, and asked if she'd like me to pick her up. She replied with her address, and I told her I'd be around by 6:30 that evening. After that, I spent the day getting cleaned up and rummaging through my storage unit of an apartment for something nice, or at least halfway decent, to wear to dinner. I wanted to make an impression. I wanted her to see that good men do still exist that can treat her like a lady, you know? If nothing else, I figured maybe it'd help her feel more secure and might open up about what was going on. About 5 o'clock that evening, I managed to find the suit I wore for my brother's wedding and was putting it through a cycle in the wash. That's when my phone buzzed with a text from Jackie. Hey, I know this is awkward, but is there any way you could come get me now? I froze. I'd just put the suit in the washer, and it wouldn't be done for another 20 minutes. I asked her if everything was okay. She replied that she was fine, but really wanted to meet up now. I asked what was going on, but she didn't reply after that. I was floored. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to do. Part of me wanted to try and press for details, and I was getting a bit nervous with how vague she was being with everything. I wondered what I'd see once I got there. Would she even be alive when I got there? Again, I'd seen shit like this play out before, and I wasn't just going to sit by and watch it happen with Jackie. I started imagining what her boyfriend was like, imagining a 6'2" gorilla whose breath reeked perpetually of Bud Light. It was with this in mind that I said, fuck the suit, and threw on a t-shirt and jeans, the cleanest ones I could find, and hopped in my car. I shot her a text saying I was on my way as I all but peeled out of the parking lot. It took me about 15 minutes to find where she lived, having to backtrack once or twice through roads I wasn't real familiar with. The city I lived in was small, sure, but I didn't exactly get out much, which made it all unfamiliar territory for me. Her house was a small one just off the corner of the downtown area, isolated with only 2 other houses neighboring it. When I pulled up, I noticed there wasn't a vehicle parked in the driveway. Damn it. Too late. Fucker's already gone. I thought as I jumped out of the car and made my way to the porch, my hand tightly gripped around the butterfly knife I always keep in my pocket. It's not exactly a nice neighborhood I live in. Jacqueline, I called, knocking on the door. For about a minute, nothing happened. I tried leaning my ear to the door to see if I could hear anything. Nothing. It was when I was texting her, telling her that I was on the porch, that I heard the door slowly open. The front door cracked open, and my heart stopped when I saw her face. It was worse than the previous day. Covering almost every inch of her face were cuts and fresh bruises alongside the ones from before. My jaw fell open and hung like someone tied a brick of lead to it. I was horrified, while at the same time overcome with rage. Now I wanted the bastard 6 feet in the ground, and I wanted to be the one that dug his grave. But what? She stepped out onto the porch, quickly shutting the door behind her. She stood there silently, her face chiseled in a state of fear, and her eyes locked onto my feet, seemingly unable to make contact with mine. Now, in the full light outside, I saw how one eye was so badly beaten it was almost swollen shut. As well as this, there were gashes now across her cheeks, fresh and still trickling with blood. I was speechless. I wasn't sure how to begin. I didn't know whether to demand she tell me who this animal was, or where I could find him, where to grab her and hold her in the tightest bear hug I could manage. In the end, I just stood still, speechless with horror. Finally, she broke the silence and asked, shaking, "Can we go, please?" Almost absently, I nodded and stammered, Where to? I don't care, she said, her voice breaking. I just need to get out. I gently took her hand and led her into my car, and we drove off. I decided against trying to take her out to a restaurant or anything like that, lugging the way she did and all. With no other ideas of where to go, I asked if she'd like to come back with me to my place for dinner. She just nodded nervously again. That'd be nice. I'll have to warn you, though, I'm not exactly the tidiest. I chuckled when I said this, hoping to lighten the mood with that. It didn't work. Doesn't matter. It'll be fine, she said anxiously, still quivering like she was cold. I could tell she wasn't in the mood to hear my voice at the moment, so the rest of the way to my apartment was spent in silence. The whole time, her eyes stared about 1,000 yards ahead through the windshield while she shook in her passenger seat. When we pulled up to my apartment, before I could even cut the engine off, Jacqueline was already undoing her seatbelt and opening the door. As quickly as I could, I turned the car off and got out after her. I got her to follow me back to my apartment. Ta-da! I said awkwardly, as I opened the door to reveal my wreck of an apartment. Home sweet home, or at least as sweet as it can be. I saw her look at me, her eyes still wide and nervous, yet still parting the left corner of her lip up with a shy half-smile. I threw some of my clutter that was on the couch to the floor beside it, giving her a place to sit down. She stood in the doorway for a second before finally trudging in and sitting down. Would you like a drink? I asked, opening the fridge. I must warn you, all I got are Millers, but they're fresh and cold. She smiled weakly again and replied, No thanks. I grabbed one for myself and made my way to the couch sitting next to her. For the first 5 minutes or so, my apartment was so dead silent that you'd have been able to hear a pin dropping from the 5th floor above me. She just sat staring at the floor. A couple of times, I saw her shaking her head like she was dizzy or something. I broke the silence by asking her if she'd like to watch something on TV. She didn't seem to notice me at first, so I called her name again. This time, her head snapped up to me. Her face looked lost and afraid at the same time. Huh? You want to watch some TV? Oh, yeah, that'd be nice. I turned it on and started flipping through channels. I finally managed to land on an episode of Family Guy and stopped there. I asked her if she was cool with that, telling her it was one of my favorites, though to be honest it wasn't. She just shrugged and said she didn't mind. By that point, it was really starting to eat away at me, at what she wasn't telling me. Again, I get it. People in her situation, especially after a particularly bad episode, like what she dealt with earlier, tend not to want to talk about it. But that didn't make things any easier for me. I became especially anxious when I saw her starting shaking her head and clutching her temples. Then I started hearing her faintly mutter under her breath, No, stop it. I don't want to. Stop. Stop what? I asked nervously, putting my hand on her shoulder. She didn't seem to notice, instead shaking her head more violently and tearing at her hair. Her clawing became violent, pulling at her ears, and I was scared she was about to rip them off. I realized she must have been having a psychological episode, maybe PTSD or something from getting the hell beat out of her that day. Unsure of what to do, I grabbed her arms and shouted her name. Jacqueline! Jacqueline! She finally stopped and looked at me again. Her eyes were wide, almost unnaturally so, looking absolutely lost and flooding with tears. Her breathing was heavy. It's okay, I said softly. It's okay, I'm here. I've got you. I don't really know why I said that. Truthfully, I didn't believe what I said. Just being lost, if not more so than she was. I guess it was the only thing I knew to say to make her feel better, or at least to keep her from doing serious harm to herself. Thankfully, it seemed to do as much because her body immediately relaxed as she then curled into a ball and buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I just froze. What was I supposed to do here? I wanted to hold her, but at the same time, I knew that might cause her to freak out again. One thing was certain. I definitely wanted to beat the shit out of the boyfriend. I'm sorry, she said through her hands. I shouldn't have come here. I'm sorry. I should go. She started to get up from the couch. I got up to stop her. Back to him? I asked. She tried to push past me into the door. I continued to block her. I couldn't let her go back to that. Hell, I wasn't even sure I was comfortable leaving her alone at this point. What are you talking about? Her boyfriend. The piece of shit that's done this to you. She shrunk down again, closing her eyes and saying, Look, you don't get it. My boyfriend didn't do this. I don't have a boyfriend, okay? I live alone. Just please, I need to go home. I was caught off guard by this. If she didn't have a boyfriend or anyone else, then who's been beating her up like this? As much as I wanted to press that question, I could see that she was desperate to leave. Then at least let me take you home, please. Just so I know you'll be okay. She looked at me and nodded. Sure. We drove in silence. Well, silent, except for her constantly mumbled. I said, no, I won't go. I don't want to. Leave me alone. I said nothing, but I can't lie. This was starting to scare me. I was terrified that at any moment she was going to start trying to tear her hair or something again. Fortunately, that didn't happen. When we pulled into her house, before she could bolt out like she couldn't get out fast enough, I put a hand out, stopping her. Call me tomorrow morning, okay? Just to let me know everything's okay, please? She half-heartedly nodded before getting out of the car. After she went inside her house, I just sat there for a good 5 or so minutes, waiting for something to happen. I almost expected to see her in the window getting hurt, either by herself or someone else, and that I was going to have to rush in after her. As it happened, all the lights were off and it was dead silent. I managed to satisfy myself that for the time being, she was okay and left her house. It was no surprise that on the drive home that night, my mind was entrapped by one big question. What the hell was going on with Jacqueline? Why was she hurting herself the way she was? What was causing her to have episodes like she did at my apartment? Did something happen to her? Maybe something that somehow scarred her? That would make sense. But then that brought up the question why she hadn't sought help. Hell, had she told anybody? If not, then why? Of course, all of this was eclipsed by the biggest question. What the hell was she talking to when she was saying, Stop, I don't want to? The only conclusion I could think of now was that she might have had some form of schizophrenia, or even some dual personality, or something like that. Again, I'm no expert on psychology, but based on what I'd seen, that was the only way I could explain what was going on. This, however, made me feel all the more uneasy about leaving her by herself. It was a good thing I was off work the next day, too, because all through the night I was essentially on high alert, just waiting for her to call or text me, panicking again. In other words, sleep was not an option. What's worse is, the entire time, try as I would otherwise, even downing a few Millers, I couldn't take my mind off of it to relax. I kept imagining that the next time I saw her, it'd be in the hospital, or worse. All I could do was pray that she'd call the next morning, telling me that things were okay. Finally, at around 8 a.m., my phone rang. Out of reflex, I mashed the green button. Hello? Jacqueline? Is everything okay? Yeah, everything's fine. Her voice sounded normal. Actually, it almost seemed relaxed. It felt almost like a total 180 from the previous time. Oh, listen, I'm sorry about last night. I know you probably think I'm nuts, but I can explain. Can we meet up again? Yeah, sure. Where at and what time? In an hour. At the park with the pier. Okay, you want me to bring anything? Maybe something for... She hung up before I could finish. I got dressed quickly and got in my car. On the way to the park, I decided to stop by the nearby Subway and grab us some food for lunch. The whole time I was wondering if the right thing to do would be to try admitting her to a hospital. I knew she probably wouldn't like the idea, but I couldn't just let her keep hurting herself like this, could I? I hadn't come to any sort of conclusion by the time I pulled up at the park either. I resolved to hear her out first, then go from there. That way, I would at least have a better understanding of what was going on. I texted her, asking her where she was and where in the park she wanted to meet up. She replied about 2 seconds later, saying she was waiting at the pier by the lake. Grabbing the sandwiches, I headed into the park and to the lake. When I got there, I saw her sitting on the edge, looking out toward the lake. Hey, so I hope you don't mind, but I brought us a bite too. It's beautiful, isn't it? I stopped. Huh? The lake. It's beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, I guess so. I slowly approached the rest of the way to her. She just sat still. My mother always tells me that the current of a lake would always wash away one's strife, that it was so peaceful to lose yourself in. Okay, I said, unsure of what I was supposed to say to this. I couldn't explain it, but something felt off. It was like some dormant instinct, a sixth sense, you can call it. It was telling me that something was up. But what? When I reached her, I put my hand on her shoulder. You hungry? I picked us up some subs from Subway. I wasn't sure what you liked, so I got you a... I hear dead people. For a moment, everything almost seemed to freeze in place. She was still and motionless, and the way she said it was like she was accepting some great truth of life. I guess a better way of saying it is that she sounded numb or hollow. I hear dead people, she repeated in that same numb tone. They tell me to join them in the end, in him. My tongue felt swollen like it had been punched. I'm sorry. What? You hear dead people, yes. And they tell you to do what now? She was quiet again for a moment. I was floored. How was I supposed to respond to that? How would you have responded to hearing this? They want me to go with them, she said finally, blankly. Go where? What do you mean? To the end, to join with them. They've been telling me that he is what waits for all of us. Huh? Who? You mean like God or something? What do you mean by waits for all of us? Even before she answered, though, I knew deep down the answer was something wrong. He doesn't have a name. He is all of us. He's what we become on the other side. He waits to be completed. They need me. He needs me to join. I could feel a series of chills prick down my spine hearing this. She sounded so relaxed when she said it, like it all seemed normal to her. It all sounded like something a cult member would say, and she said it like it was nothing. This was scaring the hell out of me now, and I was certain of one thing. One way or another, I had to find her some kind of help. They've been telling me this ever since my mother died last year. I always hear her telling me to follow her to the end and join with him. I slowly reached out and gently put my hand on her shoulder. Jackie, come on, let's get out of here. We can find someone to help me, she asked, interrupting me. Is that what you were going to say? I stayed silent. She let out a scoff and said, Look, if you won't believe me, what makes you think anyone else will? I was stumped. I wanted to grab her hand and take her to the nearest hospital. I wanted to tell her things were okay and that the voices weren't real. But I didn't. Instead, I clammed up. Besides which, she continued, starting to stand up, it's all right. Everything's going to be fine now. I'm done running. What happened next felt like it lasted an eternity, despite it lasting only about a couple of minutes. I remember briefly noticing that she had her shoelaces tied together in a ball, joining both feet together. While my brain was busy with wondering about this, as well as trying to take in what I was hearing and trying to figure out how to find some help for her, she looked me in the eyes for the first time since I got there and said, Thanks for being here now, Otto. I, for only a split second, saw that her hands were duct taped together. By the time it fully hit me exactly what she planned to do, I'd be too late to stop her. In one fluid motion, she flung her body backward and was instantly swallowed by the lake. I rushed over and saw that she was almost too far down to see, only faintly glimpsing her eyes looking back up at me, wide and panicking. I turned back and shouted at a few others walking by to call 911 before diving headfirst into the lake after her. I flailed frantically as hard as possible, pushing myself deeper and deeper after her. It was useless, though. The lake ran deep, and it got darker, murkier the further down it went. Because of this, I couldn't see a thing. I also had never been a good swimmer in the first place. I had to push myself back up for air and go back down again several times, still unable to reach her. Eventually, my body grew weak, and I couldn't even move my arms and legs anymore. My body then started sinking too, and I was forced to take in a mouthful of water, unable to hold my breath any longer. That's when I finally blacked out, falling to the bottom of the lake along with Jacqueline. I remember coming to on the pier, dizzy, puking, and spewing up lake water. Over me was a paramedic holding a jump bag and an oxygen mask. He's responsive, he shouted to the group on the other side of the pier. Are you okay, sir? I stared blankly at him, still catching my breath. It took a moment before everything came rushing back to me. Jacqueline, I cried, bolting up. The paramedic stopped me, telling me to calm down. I looked around to see police officers at the edge of the pier begin walking toward me. When they questioned me as to what happened, I told them the truth as I knew it, that she had jumped into the river after telling me that she'd heard voices. I expressed that I also had every intention of trying to find help for her. They seemed to accept this as there was no other evidence, physical or from witnesses, to suggest anything otherwise, and I was free to go home. From there, life sort of just went on. It was weird. I, of course, spent a couple of weeks following losing myself to the bottle every night after work. Finally, I was turned out from Porky Brothers when it got to the point that I wasn't really able to function in the kitchen anymore. I read a week later in the paper that Jackie's body was finally found after dragging the lake. Eventually, though, I managed to actually sort of move on. I found another job at a much nicer restaurant, one that actually paid a bit better, and it felt like I could push Jacqueline to the back of my head. Distant memory. That's when I started hearing it, though. Or rather, hearing her. It happened one night when I'd come home from work and was about to go to bed when I started hearing her voice calling my name. Otto! Otto! Then I saw her. She looked like she did when she was alive. Actually, she looked even better, being without the bruises. I rubbed my eyes. What the hell? Otto, it's me, Jacqueline, remember? She was smiling when she said it, Her voice was smooth and calming. I closed my eyes, shaking my head. When I opened them, she was gone. Come on, man, get a grip. I decided to quickly down a couple of Millers before going to bed. That night, in my sleep, though, there she was again. She was standing in front of me, naked and smiling warmly. You're lonely, aren't you, Otto? It's time. Come join us. Join with him. Before I can ask what she's talking about, as well as how she's there and what she wants with me, I hear a flurry of shrill whispers coming from behind me. Then out of the corner of my eyes, I see thousands of white streaks rush past, each of them elongated mouths screaming simultaneously, "Come join us!" I was horrified. I tried to make myself wake up, but it was no use. I could only watch as the screaming streaks began swirling around in a vortex motion behind Jacqueline. Jackie herself then started descending toward the center, her voice blending chaotically with the rest, enchanting for me to join with him. Upon reaching the center, I see her and the others start to morph, blending together and molding into the shape of a man. It, was tall and dark, like he was made out of the void itself. It had 4 long, gangly arms that stretched out further and further towards me to snatch me and drag me into it. Every part of it was comprised of the screaming faces, as more and more of them continued to conjoin. All around me was a horrific cacophony of their screams. Join us! The last thing I remember hearing before waking up was Jackie's voice telling me it was time to join with him. I almost jumped out of my bed, and I didn't go back to sleep again that night. That was almost a month ago. Every day since, I keep seeing them, hearing them, always telling me to join them. Every time I see the thing, him, getting closer. I haven't been able to sleep, and I can't function during the day either. I'm always hearing them. I don't know what this thing is or what it'll do when it reaches me in my sleep, but I'm 100% certain that it's probably something unholy, something horrible. I've been trying pills, but they only last so long before I hear them again. The only hope I have now is that I'm just fucking losing it. That grief is somehow driving me, like it drove Jackie with her mother to see this shit. I beg of you, please show me some kind of proof that what I'm seeing isn't real. I'm fucking scared right now. I can hear them right now. God damn it. I don't want to go.
Whoever said that sleep is for the weak can go to hell. Sleep sharpens a person. It toughens you. After one night in this pit, my mind's a diamond. It started off like any other work night. I was in my office doing night work. When my clock struck 1, I checked my wristwatch, a Daniel Lowe. It told me it was 2:03 a.m. Amused, I turned my head to the framed engraving of Nebuchadnezzar hanging by my liquor. Before I know it, I'm standing there with an empty glass, admiring the Doré woodcut as I grab a bottle. I refill my ice and whiskey as lightning flashes outside my windows. It's raining buckets. I count 5 fingers on my left hand. The last time I checked, I counted 8. A roll of thunder gently rocks the office. I lift my tumbler to my lips and count the ice cubes bobbing in it. I count them again, but then I hesitate. Something's not right, I realize. I hold the crystal to my eyes and inspect its details against the lamplight. Every groove and speck of gold appears precisely where they should be. Even my fingerprints are visible, and they never are. Not in this place. I stand transfixed in disbelief. How is this real? I know it isn't. That's when I remember the old engraving encased in glass in front of me. I lean close to the framed doorway and search for my reflection on its shiny surface. To my relief, I search in vain. All I see is Nebuchadnezzar roasting his victims. My heartbeat slows. I reclaim my wits. I remind myself, it's just a dream. I clench my tumbler into a fist and punch the ancient king with all my strength, forcing glass and jagged crystal fragments deep into my skin. Beads of blood roll down the picture as whiskey licks my wounds like burning tongues. It hurts like the dickens, but I'm used to it. Every now and then I need to pinch myself to know I'm dreaming. After wrestling with the pain, I pull my hand back from the portrait. The engraving is undamaged, and my uninjured fingers are cradling an empty glass. I check my watch. It's 13:30, an hour which I know does not exist. Satisfied, I refill the tumbler and enjoy my drink, thinking life's a dream, and that's the way she found me. More specifically, that's when she chose to make her presence felt. Detective King. I glance at the King of Spades painted against my office door. The shapely silhouette of a woman stands behind its smoky glass. The door's unlocked, I tell her. In my mind, it always is. When solving cases in your sleep, I find it's best not to keep too many memories locked away. You can come in. The doorknob turns with a crack of thunder and seems to open on its own. I swear her hands never leave her side. Knowing what I do now, I don't think all the locks in Alcatraz would have kept her from me. She casts the shadow of an hourglass as she walks into my office. She is tall for a dame, a blonde, and dressed from hat to heels in black. Her lips are full, her skin like marble, and her thick hair styled in a classic fashion, late 19th century. She looks dressed to kill, in ways you'd never know unless she found you, or unless you found yourself, as I did, on the receiving end of her piercing stare. Her eyes, those steel blue eyes as deep as the ocean, as hard as ice. One look from them could have sent a chill down a dead man's spine, or at the very least raise his eyebrows. Good evening, ma'am. I shut the door behind us and inherit her coat and hat. No jewelry, I notice, nor makeup. You on your way to a funeral, or did you just come from one? She answers, neither. I pause and tilt my head at her, unsure if she's acting wise or if I need to wise up. In either case, that makes two of us. Please, have a seat. Her coat and hat have a familiar look and heft to them when I hang them. To my confusion, they're both bone dry, even though it's pouring rain, and she didn't arrive with an umbrella. I remind myself that this black skirt is just a passing shadow in my mind. She's in my dream, my brain, my temple. She is Athena, and I'm her Zeus. Would you like a splash of poison? I ask as I pour myself more whiskey. Poison doesn't work on me. I smirk. Sounds like you're speaking from experience. As expected, she does not respond, but not for the reason I intended. I look over my shoulder to see her seated with her back to me. I don't know if she's watching the rain outside my windows or... Realizing my error, I collect the folders strewn on my desk and return them to my file cabinet. 2 go into the top drawer, and 1 goes in the middle. Looking down, I give my bottom drawer a gentle kick. It remains as locked as Fort Knox. I return to my desk, adding, I'm sorry about the mess. As I sit down, to my surprise, the woman isn't looking out my windows, but at them. Specifically, at the one behind my head. I swivel around and read my name painted on it, along with the same playing card as on my door. Got something on your mind, Missy? Yes, if you don't mind me asking. I can't say I'll mind until I hear it, so ask away. Just keep the question short and complimentary. She returns my smile with a false one. Why did you settle on the King of Spades? For the agency? She nods. I understand the king, Detective King, but why did you choose the King of Spades? Well, because Spade and Archer were a pair of jokers. I offer the gal a cigarette, which she declines. Those things are deadly. Huh, I agree. I don't like jokers. I light myself a lucky strike. What about the King of Diamonds? I'm a detective, darling, not a jeweler. The King of Clubs. I shake my head. That symbol looks too much like a pawnbroker's from the sidewalk. Why not the King of Hearts? My God, I think. Lady, did you come here with a job or to play pinochle? That's not an answer to my question, she replies with moxie. I freeze in place, wondering what corner of my subconscious this gal crawled out of. I asked you why you did not wish to be identified by the King of Hearts. Does the card not suit you well, detective? Two long, angry plumes of smoke shoot from my nostrils. The woman's got more backbone than a brontosaurus. Outside, I'm furious. Deep down, I'm terrified. At that moment, a gentle knock begins to rap against my eardrums. It's coming from somewhere inside the office. Thunder, I tell myself. It's only thunder. This time, a second, louder knocking jostles the bottom drawer of my file cabinet. My eyes shift to and from the files. Outside, the storm intensifies. Lightning flashes against my windows, projecting my name against the walls. But not the King of Spades beneath it. No. All I see is the King of Hearts. I shut my eyes and I down my whiskey. As the liquor goes to work, the pounding and flashing stops. I take a breath and regain my marbles. I'm sorry, lovely, but my time is limited. How limited? Increasingly. I close the window blinds behind me, obscuring the name and playing card the dame just played me with. So, if you don't mind me asking, dollface, who are you? And why are you here? The dame in black leans toward me, bathing her face in the shadow of my window blinds. I'm looking for information on an old case you worked. Which one? The Bauerdorf murder. I take a deep drag from my cigarette as I look the gal down and up. You a family member? Her pink lips purse, concealing her amusement. Not exactly. You a college friend, a former roommate? Lover? I ask. All three? I had hoped to arouse some anger with my line of questioning. In my experience, it knocks people off their game and spills their beans, be it in a game of poker or in the dream world. I'm waiting for those dark blue diamonds in her eyes to flash like daggers. Instead, the dame just sits with her eyes downcast, unaffected, like she was waiting for a bus to hit me. I narrow my eyelids into snake slits. There's something familiar about this damsel, and whatever it is, she's hiding it from me. My mind is boiling. Well, I hate to break it to you, dollface, but your time would be better spent searching in a library. I never took that case. That was West Hollywood, and the LAPD doesn't work that beat. The case never came to you? I shake my head and stab my cigarette into an ashtray. You got me wrong. As I said, the LAPD works LA. The West Hollywood Bulls patrol West Hollywood. I was with the LAPD during the dame locks eyes with me, catching me off guard. God damn, she's good, I think. Where was I? The LAPD? Yes. I clear my throat. West Hollywood was outside our jurisdiction. Therefore, the Bauerdorf murder never came to me. Not even accidentally. Her steely eyes probe mine like ice picks, sending a deep chill down my neck. I lower my head to hide my face, incensed over how well she's using my own mind games against me. What you're looking for is in a book somewhere. This book? I snap my head to see the vixen standing alongside my file cabinet. Its top drawer is open, and she's reading a small hardcover in the lamplight. Get away from there! I leap from my desk straight to the cabinet and slam it shut. Unfortunately, this causes the middle drawer to pop open, revealing several pages covered with redactions. As I wrestle to control the cabinet, I wedge my foot against the floor to prevent any chance of the bottom drawer busting open. "What is this?" the lady asks, her eyes burrowed in the book. "That's nothing." I reach for the text, but she keeps it from me. "That book's top drawer stuff, old memories, it's nothing dangerous." "Then why is there blood on it?" I hear dripping, and it isn't rain. She hands the book back to me and my mind's eye zooms in on the dark memento. I see the book laid atop a desktop, just as I found it at Los Angeles Public Library. It's October 1944. I'm wearing my old LAPD uniform, and I'm interviewing 2 librarians about the grim discovery they made that morning. "I saw it, officer. There was blood on its pages, I swear." "Did you see who returned it, ma'am?" "No. It must have been here all evening. But the last person who checked it out was—" "Ma'am?" I'm sorry, officer. It's just... The book had been checked out by the woman murdered in Hollywood last week, officer." "Thank you, ma'am." "Detective King?" I look away from the blood-stained book and the dame in black. With my mind made up, I wander back to Nebuchadnezzar and pour myself more liquid courage. 8 years ago, some crackpot returned a book to the public library smeared with blood. The book was on loan to Georgette Bauerdorf, deceased. So I collected it as evidence and delivered it to the detectives at West Hollywood. "Did you read the book?" Only the parts with blood on them." "This section?" The dame in black hands me a wad of typed-up pages. As I reach for them, our fingers touch. Her skin's as smooth as melting ice. I remove a paperclip from the pages and accidentally slice my finger. The cut hurts so much. The pain is blinding. I drop the pages and my mind flashes with the white of wood pulp. I see myself, still in uniform, typing at LAPD Central Station. As my fingers tap dance atop my Remington, I turn my head to and from the blood-stained pages on my desk. A Study of Dreams by Friedrich von Eden. Letter by letter, I preserve the memory. Since 1896, I have studied my own dreams, writing down the most interesting in my diary. In 1898, I began to keep a separate account for a particular kind of dream, which seemed to me the most important, and I have continued it up to this day. Altogether, I collected about 500 dreams, of which 352 were the particular kind just mentioned. This material may form the basis of what I hope may become a scientific structure of some value. I pause to read the essay, but I'm no longer at the headquarters. I'm in my apartment on that same evening, about to attempt what Friedrich von Eden dubbed lucid dreaming. In these lucid dreams, the reintegration of the psychic functions is so complete that the sleeper remembers day life and his own condition, reaches a state of perfect awareness, and is able to direct his attention and to attempt different acts of free volition. Perfect awareness. There's no better way to describe it. I remember it as clear as crystal. I remember my first lucid dream. I see myself staring at my hands in disbelief, realizing the godlike powers that are my fingertips. I see myself performing fantastic feats, flying, surviving gunshots, and even conversing with fallen friends. And then I take the big jump. I see myself exploring the deepest depths of my mind and memory. In a single plunge, I see my subconscious. I relive it all, my entire memory, the entire world, my entire life. I also witnessed the crime that got me here. Through my mind's eye, I see the Bauerdorf murder as it played out. I reconstruct the evening precisely as my subconscious knows it. It's October 12th, 1944, just after midnight. Georgette Bauerdorf, brunette, age 20, returns to her apartment after a busy night at the Hollywood canteen. A man is waiting for her, one of many draftees she's met there. He's one of the hundreds of men she works with, dances with, and occasionally sleeps with. He's been there before. He knows the location. He unscrews the light bulb outside her door, leaving a fingerprint. He's also a patient predator. He stalks. He lingers. And as he waits, he reads a book Georgette has open, some bedside reading on lucid dreaming. I read the last words printed on the page before Georgette's blood stains them. We are here, however, on the borders of a realm of mystery where we have to advance very carefully. To deny may be just as dangerous and misleading as to accept. I don't deny the warning. I accept it. I recognize my responsibility as a law enforcer, and I search for answers in the realm of mystery. I gasp for air. Did you see that? I ask the dame in black beside me. She shakes her head. I don't have much experience at dreaming. Why not? She sighs. I never sleep. My eyes widen. You don't? Why? Too much work, she tells me flatly. Curious what work is like within the dream world, I ask, what do you do? She turns her back on me and changes the subject. I understand that you dream differently. How do you control them? I approach her with a smirk of confidence. You use your head. I snap my fingers in front of her and then present her with the most beautiful rose one can imagine. She accepts it speechlessly. Anyone can lucid dream by spotting telltales that they're asleep. Once you find them, the secret to not waking up is simply not to mind them. I guess my line of work prepared me well for that. When you're a cop, you're always on the lookout for something suspicious. When you're dreaming, something suspicious tends to delve into the fantastic. It could be an extra finger, a change in scenery, a lack of reflection. Anything you know could only happen in a dream. Once you find them, you work with them. Eventually, you learn how to build with them. I guide her gaze to the windows, presenting the entire world of my creation. The woman runs her eyes over the rainy cityscape. This is all you're doing. I smile, every inch of it, including you, my lovely. I hate to break it to you, but only one of us is alive. It's like through the looking glass. You're Alice, and I'm the Red King, fast asleep. You're just a girl in my dream this evening. Fortunately, it's a good dream. I shoot my dream girl a wink. She smiles softly and leans against me as we watch the storm. I put my arm around her and run my fingers through her hair. Briefly, one of my fingers grazes her cheek. I flinch. Her flesh is icy to the touch. The woman sees the surprise on my face and pushes herself away from me before I can apologize. Tell me more about the murder, she says, her back to me. Irritated with myself over my error, I lean against my file cabinet. I'm sorry, but I can't. There's only so much I can tell you without this place going haywire. It could get messy. You said you could control this world. I can, but I can also lose control of it. Even I have nightmares sometimes, and when you're a lucid dreamer, experiencing a lucid nightmare could do a number on you. I could go crazy. You won't, she insists. The dame folds her arms and straightens her posture. I'll be here. I choke on my own throat, unable to contain my laughter. Sweetheart. Oh, it doesn't work that way. The woman's diamond eyes begin to water. To my shock, a single teardrop drips down her face. You won't protect me? Hey. I dab her tears with a handkerchief. There's no reason for that, dollface. It's not that I don't like you or don't trust you. I just don't want you to see the worst this place has to offer. What are you afraid of? I exhale, exhausted from avoiding the obvious. Here, I say. I loop my arm around my lady's and lead her to my file cabinet. As I said, you can build entire worlds in here. The Romans called them memory palaces, but I like to keep things simple. I like the office I'm asleep in. The only difference is this number. I rap my knuckles against the file cabinet. All my memories are in here. Unfortunately, memories tend to come in 3 flavors: good, bad, and nightmarish. I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. While those are memories I'm prepared to live with, I don't want them setting up shop in here. It's too dangerous, too traumatizing. This file cabinet is the only thing keeping the worst from taking over. It's where I cage my demons. The dame looks up at me, worry in her eyes. "Detective King," she gasps, still clutching my handkerchief. "What have you done?" I lead her back to my armchair so that I can break it to her gently. Once she's seated, I light myself another cigarette and lean against my desk. When I delivered that book to West Hollywood, the sheriff's department couldn't make heads or tails of it. They were dumb as donuts. All they knew was that Miss Bauerdorf spent most of her nights with men in uniform. Georgette was just a child. She was only 20 years old, an angel. And she was brutally raped and murdered by someone who most likely was enlisted. We were in the middle of a war. I didn't want to see her killer get off easy, not with dimwits like D.A. Hauser granting leniency to soldiers right and left. I had to do something. "Why you? Who gave you that right?" That stung me. The American people gave me that right. I took an oath, Princess. It was my duty. I swore to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic. Because of some harebrained law involving maps, Miss Bauerdorf's killer stood no chance of facing justice. The LAPD should have been allowed to take that case. We would have found that angel's killer, and we would have sent him straight to hell. The system failed to protect Miss Bauerdorf. So, I had to act. Alone. In the name of justice. The dame begins to crush my handkerchief into a fist. "And what, if I may ask, is your idea of justice?" At this point, my ashtray is up to its ass and butts. I collected all the evidence I could find on the Bauerdorf murder. I spent night after night examining them at that desk, and unlike the detectives at West Hollywood, I found the man who murdered Georgette Bauerdorf. He was a draftee, en route to San Francisco for deployment in the Pacific. I got him dead to rights by comparing fingerprints found at the scene with records the Navy had on file. He covered his tracks, both at the scene and when he returned that library book. It was all a ruse, to dupe the dullards at West Hollywood into thinking the Bauerdorf killer was still in the city. And it worked in spades. He had probably killed before, and I have no doubt that he would have killed again. That's why I gave him a choice once I confronted him in San Francisco. If he didn't kill himself right then and there, I'd do it myself. And I didn't plan to make it quick and painless. A dark shadow spreads across the damsel's face. "You were an officer of the law and you convinced this man to kill himself." I nod. "That's right. And I'd do it again if I had to." "You did do it again," she said, seething, "and many more times after that." My eyes widen. Jesus Christ, lady. How much about me do you know already? She snaps her head in anger toward my file cabinet's bottom drawer. Horrified, I rush over to make sure its lock is still intact. Relieved, I turn my head back to the dame. My hair's a mess, and my heart is pounding. "How much did you see in there?" She rises. "I can assure you that I have never opened that drawer." "Don't lie to me, Cupcake. You've been stringing me along this entire evening. I know you're hiding something from me. But for now, I want some answers. Did you see the contents of this drawer? Tell me the truth! The woman doesn't raise her volume or resort to threats. She just stares straight at me and says, without a flinch, I never lie. I swallow. Convinced, I pour myself another drink and lay down on my sofa. A night like this, I muse while staring at the ceiling. I sometimes think my mind is on a downward spiral. The dame in black sits next to me, her chair beside my head. What do you see that spiral leading to? My eyes stare aimlessly at the ceiling fan as I say, suicide. A long, unbroken silence is shared between us. It's just so exhausting. I continue, trying to keep all those demons buried. How many are there? I clench my jaw as I say the number. 21. You killed 21 men. I closed 21 unsolved cases. The Black Dahlia, Bugsy Siegel. I found every one of their killers. Each one of them escaped the system, but I caught them. Did you kill them all? This ruffles my feathers. Not all of them, just the ones who weren't open to my persuasion. Did you always give them the choice of death or suicide? I nod from my sofa pillow. I convinced them to kill themselves so that the boys in the clubhouse would quickly close their investigation. It was my best defense. Did any officers know what you were doing? No, but what? I turn my head and look at the dream girl next to me. By God, she's beautiful. Would you check that drawer for me? She looks off and back. They're fine. I put another cigarette in my mouth and the dame lights it for me. Thanks, sweetheart. Continue. I puff away. Once I made detective, one too many criminals I arrested committed suicide immediately before their trial. I knew they would have gotten off for lack of evidence. I had no choice. It was the only way to keep them off the streets. I was never indicted for what I'd done, but with internal affairs swimming around like sharks, I had to get out of there. I took my tin and heater and off I went to the private sector. They had a nickname for you during this time, didn't they? I nod in sad acceptance. Yeah. Suicide King. The King of Hearts, she says. You have quite a talent for suicide, don't you? I wouldn't call it a talent. What is it then? Experience? Lightning flashes, blinding me as my ears fill with the sound of glass shattering. I see a small house with a broken window, a young boy crying, and a mother trying to console him. It's not your fault, she says, but the kid won't have it. Why did he die? These things happen, my love. No! We killed him! No, we didn't. That poor bird killed itself. Why? Because God told him to. In a rapid montage of flashes, I see a dead bird on the ground, the dame pulling a bloodied window pane from my file cabinet, and a Rorschach ink blot framed on the wall in front of me. No matter how many times I stare at this, it always looks to me like a bird flying into glass. It was my first glimpse of death, of suicide. I could never shake the image from my head. The dame in black stands beside me, hanging off my arm. Do you want to tell me about your mother? I shake my head. That'd be opening Pandora's box. There must be something you can tell me. I close my eyes and turn away from the Rorschach. She died a few years ago in a nursing home. I never visited her. I pause. I should have. The sound of rain fills in the silence and the dame leans her head against my shoulder. Can I ask you one last question? I look down at her and smile softly. For you, doll? Anything. The woman moves closer to me. If your mother were still alive, do you think she would forgive you? No. I don't think so. Why? Why would she? I stuck her in a dead-end nursing home to die alone. The dame goes silent. I don't know if she's thinking or if she's waiting. Finally, she says, if she loved you, she might forgive you. Grateful, I take my dream girl by her hand. To my surprise, it's warm. I throw my arms around her and hold her tightly. I don't know who she is or where she came from, but something about her is irreplaceable. She's my dream girl, and I don't want to break our hearts by waking up. I pet her hair and ask, what's your name? The raindrops on my windows roll down her face like tears. Her eyes are downcast. You wouldn't like it. Please, doll. I want to hear it. She looks at me and I at her. My lady in black closes her ice blue eyes and parts her lips. The entire world around us holds its breath. I want to kiss her, but before I do, what's your name? I beg her. Tell me. With cold breath and quiet lips, she whispers, Death. My subconscious realizes before I do. The office shakes as if a bomb exploded. I throw the girl away from me and back away in horror. My God. I am so sorry. A flash of lightning reveals her visage. Beneath her hair and beauty, I see the hooded, skinless, lifeless skull of death. What the hell are you doing here? I gasp. I had no choice, she sobs. You made me do this. I did? Tears come pouring down her face. How could you? A boom of thunder rocks the building. The lights go out, and my lady vanishes. Horrified, I take out my lighter and flick it on. As I creep through the darkened office, I hear a pounding at my door. I turn around with my gun primed and pointed. Who's there? I holler. I walk up to the door and crack it open. After peeking out, I see a hideous image from my past, face to face. It's a familiar face, a bloodied face. The face of Georgette Bauerdorf's killer after I watched him hang himself. I slam my door and lock it as the killer throws himself against its window. As I unload my pistol through its smoky glass, blood splatters the King of Hearts painted on it. I back away from the door and topple a bookcase as a barricade. To my disgust, each of its shelves contains copies of the same blood-covered book. I jump backward, bumping into the coat and hat the dame in black had brought in earlier. They're still hanging from my coat rack, but for some reason the garments now have tags from a pawnbroker. I try to wish away the calamity around me. I try to control my dream. I throw my arms out and cry, Enough! It doesn't work. All my years of lucid dreaming fail to save me. I feel paralyzed and powerless. And worst of all, no matter how hard I try, I can't escape. I can't wake up. Lightning flashes and I see a face in front of me. I fire my gun and hear glass shattering. I inspect the damage and then stagger backward. The figure was my reflection in my framed engraving of Nebuchadnezzar. I spin around in a tizzy, firing my pistol in every direction. I know you're here! I shout, panicking. Show yourself! I want you out of my head! A light clicks on in front of me. It's the lamp atop my file cabinet. I walk toward it with my gun still smoking. My eyes widen with shock. The padlock on my bottom drawer has been shot off. Realizing the nightmare I unleashed, I snap my head back toward my door. A wave of 20 suicides breaks against it. Their faces and blood-stained figures press against my window, desperate to butt and claw their way inside. I leap over my desk and tear down my blinds, prepared to jump through my window. As expected, the King of Hearts covers the glass in front of me. I fire my gun straight at the image, but the window doesn't shatter. Instead, water pours in through the holes I made. Baffled, I peer out the window at the city, and the sight leaves me speechless. As far as I can see, the entire city of Los Angeles, my office included, is underwater. I back away from the windows and bump into the dame in black. "What's going on?" I stammer. "Who's doing this?" "You are," she says without a flinch. "This is the world you created your entire life." "How the hell am I responsible for this?" I demand at gunpoint. Before she answers, a deep, metallic rumble courses through my office. I look outside and see something that even I would not have dreamed. "My God," I gasp. A warship the size of a Chrysler building plunges beneath the waves atop the city. The ship comes crashing down just outside my office, shaking everything. Water comes pouring in through my fractured windows. I'm scared to death, but not as frightened as the sailors I see outside. The doomed men pound their palms against my windows in a desperate attempt to get inside. I back away and shake my head at them, knowing that they are doomed. That's when I start seeing shark fins. One of the sailors, just a teenager, erupts with blood as a tiger shark attacks him from behind. Another shark descends on him, disemboweling him. I watch in horror as the poor young lad is ripped in two. The attack turns into a feeding frenzy as hundreds of sailors are torn apart before my eyes. "The man you murdered in San Francisco," the woman in black says to me, "was a sailor on a warship called the USS Indianapolis. The ship was sunk by the Japanese 4 months later, taking 300 lives with it, while condemning another 900 to the open sea for days. Only 317 men survived after watching hundreds of their comrades starve or drown. Others chose suicide, Detective King. The rest were attacked by sharks and eaten alive. Some of them were just boys, Detective. And such was the death you sent them to." "That was your handiwork," I barked to her. "Not mine. I am not like you. I am not death." "No, but you pretend you are. It is not your place to whisper suicide into an unsuspecting ear. That is my role, Detective King. My responsibility. My curse." "Yeah? Just as it was your job to kill Georgette Bauerdorf?" I sneer. "No," she says with angry eyes. "She was taken before her time, as was her killer." I shake my head at her. "I will not apologize to you for the lives I took. Don't apologize to me. Apologize to them." The woman outstretches her arms and points to the sea of blood outside my window. "If you had taken Georgette Bauerdorf's killer to justice, none of these young men would have died in vain. The Indianapolis would have stayed ashore while its crew and officers testified at the killer's trial. the ship would have never met its awful fate. You cost all these men their future, their hopes, their lives. Look upon your work, King of Suicide and Despair. Speechlessly, I take it in. Nearly 1,000 men dead in the water, all floating food to manic sharks. It is a crimson masterpiece of death, and I am its composer. For a moment, I feel what it is like to be the figure standing next to me for a single, chilling instant. I am death. Finally, it is too much. I hang my head and turn away, prepared to face the demon sent to claim me. If there's any more suffering I must atone for, please make it quick. The woman turns her head and guides my eyes to my file cabinet. Its bottom drawer is ajar. Obediently, mindlessly, and all but hopelessly, I open it. Within the bottom drawer are my deepest shames and fears, my worst memories and atrocities, the most disgraceful excuses for my existence. I look into the cabinet and find a blood-stained folder. As I pick it up, a single faded photograph slides out of it. It falls face down onto the floor, and I bend down to pick it up. I take one look at the picture, and then collapse onto my knees. The photograph was one of many I inherited from my late mother. It is old, a relic from the late 19th century, just like the hairstyle of the woman in it. My mother, as a young lady. I drop the picture. The woman in black behind me is wearing my mother's face. White-hot tears pour down my cheeks. "Why did you do this?" I ask. "Why her?" "Why my mother?" "Because she was the last life you claimed, Detective King. She did not die from age or illness. She killed herself the day she realized that you, her son, had cast her there to disappear. She died alone and forgotten. You condemned her to her fate." With those words, I bury my face into my hands. As I sob, my wall clock chimes. My windows shatter. My whole office begins to flood. If I do nothing, I will drown. If I dive through my windows, the sharks will kill me. If I go out my door, I will have to fight my way through the fists and teeth of every criminal I condemn to suicide. My pupils focus. Determined to defy the world, I push myself up from the ground and point my pistol at the woman. I feel the killer instinct in me fighting for survival, but for all my strength and desperation, I cannot pull the trigger. After all I've sinned, I cannot bring myself to murder my own mother. Behind the woman, the suicides outside my door attack my barrier. Chunks of bloodied flesh float throughout my flooded office. As I run my eyes over the nightmare, I ask the shade, "Is this all a dream?" The woman shakes her head in uncertainty. "As I said, I don't have much experience at dreaming." Frustrated, I bite my lip so hard it's bleeding. At that moment, the Rorschach framed on my wall shatters. A dead bird comes crashing through the frame and lands at my feet with a wet thud. I stare at the bird, its broken body twisted in grotesque angles, just as I remembered it. In my experience, I tell the dame, there's always one surefire way to check out of this hotel. My eyes fall to my pistol, as do hers. Are you sure you want to do this? Unsure, I check my wristwatch. The goddamn dial's broken. No, but you forced my hand. I stand tall and face the lady with my pistol held to my temple. My finger twitches, about to pull the trigger. My dream girl shakes her head. Don't do it, she begs. Please, if you love me, don't kill yourself. I'm sorry, sweetheart. It's been a dream come true to share this evening with you, but we're at the end of our road. It's time for me to shuffle off. See what else is out there. I take a final breath and cross myself. Farewell, lovely. With death's work done, she accepts my resignation with a kiss. Rest in peace, she whispers. I pull the trigger. My debt is paid.
Well, here we are, Warner stated as he stopped walking, stationing himself at the top of the hill. The three of us trailing slightly behind him eventually made our way to where he stood.
We'll lay it down here in one of these houses for tonight. Finish up in the morning.
Kevin, Martin, and I had now managed to move up alongside Warner and look down the opposite side of the hill to where he was gesturing to. The hill gradually sloped away from the dense woods we had traveled through the past 3 days and opened to a cul-de-sac street with houses lined on either side. I was preparing to comment on the sudden appearance of a neighborhood this far out in the middle of the wilderness until I saw the homes in better detail. The houses were older two-storied structures that, after being closely surveyed, I saw their abnormalities. All the homes were deteriorating and boarded up. Sheets of plywood and wood planks were nailed across the windows and doors. Their neglected lawns were of tall, unkept grass and overrun with weeds. It appeared from where we stood to be nothing more than an abandoned ghost town, or at least a street from one. It was Kevin who spoke first.
What the hell is this? It used to be part of the town of Merriam at one time, Werner said. About 8 or 10 years ago, the Department of Interior came in and took this land from these people.
The Department of Interior? Can they do that? I questioned.
They can, and they did,
Werner continued.
Most of the land we hiked through these last few days is government property. The National Park Service was planning on establishing an expansion of some type of state park or something, and those houses you're looking at just happen to be on the edge of that park. Well, they didn't want these old-looking houses being anywhere near a recreation area where the public could see them. They called them an eyesore, an embarrassment. So the government came in and acquired all this land by eminent domain.
They just came in and took it? Asked Martin.
In a sense, yeah. You see, these homes are on the furthest outskirts of town, probably 4 or 5 miles from the next group of homes that are closer to the center of town. The government came in and informed all the residents what they were preparing to do and offered them money to move, or they'd be moved, if they liked it or not. There was no negotiation on the matter, and as you can see,
he pointed to the houses below.
One way or another, they got everyone out.
So if that was the case,
Kevin said,
why are all these houses still here? Why aren't they all bulldozed to the ground?
Yeah, why are they all still here? Martin added, adjusting his backpack.
The kicker is, after they bought up the land and kicked everyone out, they abandoned the project. You believe that? After all that mess they started with evicting everyone from their houses that had been in their families for decades, they changed their friggin' minds. Property was already there, so it wasn't like the people could come back. Some tried to move back in, but the state police patrolled the street occasionally, and anyone they found, they arrested and had charges put against them. Trespassing, they called it.
That's fucked up,
Kevin said. Yeah, it is. The government didn't even want to pay to have the houses knocked down afterwards. Just left everything as you see it now. It's eerie looking, I finally said. We stared at the abandoned street for a brief moment in silence, trying to visualize what it may have looked like back before the evictions, and how the unfortunate residents may have reacted once they broke the deplorable news to them.
All right then, now you all know,
Werner finally said as he made his way down the hill toward the street.
Let's get set up inside the house before it gets dark.
The three of us nodded in agreement and followed him down. Kevin, Martin, and I, natives of New Jersey, had hired an experienced hiking guide who was familiar with the country in West Virginia, where we decided to embark on a 4-day hiking tour through the vast forest there. That's how we came across Werner, who overheard us talking at the local diner in Merriam as we were staying at the hotel there, and volunteered his services. Werner was close to 30 years older than our own late 20s and had the classic mountain man appearance, including the rugged features and a long graying beard. So, with a reliable guide who claimed to have grown up in Merriam and knew the area well, we started out of town on Friday morning and would circle through the surrounding woodlands on a 4-day hike that would end with us returning at the opposite end of town sometime on Monday. Following Werner, we were soon off the slope of the hill and making our way through a backyard of the nearest house, which contained a rusted, lopsided swing set. The tall grass rose to our knees as we passed through and rounded the house, making our way onto the street out front. From there, looking down the middle of the street, it was as if we were in some type of post-apocalyptic landscape. The decrepit boarded-up houses and their overgrown lawns, fallen leaves and branches mostly covering the street with strands of weeds growing up through the cracks in the pavement. Pieces of discarded household debris was strewn everywhere.
"You stay in these houses a lot?"
asked Martin as he observed the old run-down houses we walked past.
There's one house in particular I camp out in when I'm passing through the area and need to hold up for the night,
he replied as we walked.
"I hope you don't make it a habit of staying out here,"
remarked Kevin. I snickered at the snide remark that Werner seemed to ignore. It was then that something caught my attention in the tall grass near the curb. I wasn't entirely sure, but it looked like a large bone. Even as I continued to walk, my gaze stayed fixed on the object. It almost appeared to be a human leg bone, a femur. I was about to question my unexpected find out loud when Werner spoke.
"This is it, number 86.
We all looked away from whatever sight was piquing our interest and watched Werner moving off the street and up the front walk to a white 2-storied house of peeling paint. The oddly leaning mailbox post near the street had the faded number 86 painted on the box.
Excuse me, Werner, but didn't you just tell us that the state police sometimes patrol around here?"
I asked, stopping at the curb.
They don't come around here no more. That was back then,"
he replied as he climbed the porch steps to the house.
"Oh, I see,"
I said, shrugging to Kevin and Martin behind Werner's back, making a goofy, bewildered face. They snickered quietly as we left the street and followed up the front walk. The steps creaked under our weight as we ascended the wooden porch, and to our surprise, Werner walked right up to the front door, which had a ragged official abandoned property notice stapled to it, and opened it right up, stepping inside as if he lived there. The three of us looked at each other in surprise.
"At least it's a minor change of scenery from being in those tents another night,"
he said, entering the home's living room area and removing his backpack. He pointed to a brick fireplace against one wall.
"Has a fireplace, too, so we can get a fire going tonight."
We stood in the room with our packs still on, looking about, soaking up our new surroundings. The room was still furnished, yet the abandoned furnishings were not in the greatest condition by far.
It was as if the former residents had simply just walked out the door once they were told of the evictions and took nothing with them. Dust covered everything, and the spiderwebs were no stranger to the home either. A sofa and armchair were set near the room's center, strategically placed near the fireplace. Against walls of peeling wallpaper were a few shelves which still held books, picture frames, and knickknacks. A long coffee table, which made little sense of its location, was placed up against one of the shelving units. That was until we saw it had been moved from the room's center to make place for a stained bare mattress which lay in its place.
"You sleep on that?"
Kevin remarked, gesturing to the filthy mattress.
"Sure,"
replied Warner, as he set his backpack on the floor and unbuttoned his flannel jacket.
"I mean, I throw my sleeping bag on top of it. Better than a hard floor, right? Plus the fireplace is right there." "I guess,"
Kevin said with uncertainty, while we too started removing our backpacks.
"You boys can set up where you like, but I got the mattress."
"No argument there," I whispered.
"Well, y'all make yourselves at home. I'm going out and gather up some wood for a fire. Be back in a few,"
Werner stated as he moved past us and back out the front door.
"Can't believe that guy actually sleeps here sometimes,"
said Kevin as he removed his jacket and searched for a place to hang it that wasn't dirty. "Hey," Martin said, pausing from removing his own jacket. "What do we do if we gotta use the bathroom? I'm sure the plumbing doesn't work." Martin, if I may be so bold to say, is kind of a whiner and worrier. Honestly, I was surprised he accompanied Kevin and me on this brief excursion. He doesn't get out much and is a bit on the pudgy side. He reminds me in a way of a young Jerry O'Connell in Stand By Me.
"The same way you've been doing it the last few days, Martin. Come on. It's not one of life's riddles. Go outside,"
Kevin answered. He was strolling about the room, looking about. "I don't know about you gents, but I'm not sleeping on any piece of furniture here. I'm sure they're infested with bugs," I said as I removed the sleeping bag from my pack and dropped it on the cleanest section of floor I could find.
"You mean you're not going to share that mattress with Werner?"
Kevin shot back. Martin found the jab most amusing. I looked up and saw that Kevin was carefully making his way up a set of stairs that led to the second floor.
"Where are you going?" "I'm going to check out the upstairs,"
he replied as he began climbing the steps. "That's all you," I said, and turned to Martin, who, despite hearing my comment on the insect-infested furniture, had slumped into the plush sitting chair. He sighed heavily as he got himself comfortable. "You're going to have bugs crawling all over you, Martin," I stated as I rolled out my sleeping bag. He only sighed again, his eyes now closed. "I don't care. I could fall asleep right here." I shook my head in disappointment. I could already picture him tomorrow morning braying like some agitated mule about all the bug bites he'll have. After several long seconds, a slight snort came from him as he had already drifted asleep. I shook my head again. It was then that Kevin appeared on the staircase. He looked about and saw that Martin was already fast asleep and snickered.
Hey, Chris, check out what I found."
"What?"
"Just come up and see."
He waved me forward. Groaning, I made my way to my feet and trudged over to the stairs. I followed him up the steps, and as I did, I noticed that though dust had coated each step, much like the rest of the house, there was evidence that someone had been using the stairs on multiple occasions and recently. Accompanying Kevin to the second floor, he quickly guided me down the hall to a bedroom. Besides the simple bedroom furniture, the room was as musty as it was shadowy, and the only window to the room had been boarded up. Streaks of sunlight pierced the spacing between the planks. The tarnished brass bed was missing its mattress.
"Look at this,"
Kevin said as he pointed to a large heap of assorted clothing stacked in a corner on the floor, then lifted a child's pink winter coat from the top. "You called me up here for this? Am I supposed to pick through this or what? I have plenty of clothes at home, Kev." Kevin dropped the coat back on the pile, then moved to a closet and opened the door.
"What about this then, huh?"
Inside the closet was a pile of shoes, almost knee-high. All types, boots, sneakers, sandals, men's and women. Okay, that's a little strange, I confessed.
That's not all,
he said, and moved to a tall dresser and opened a couple of the drawers.
Look at this shit.
I slid up closer to his side and peeked in the drawers. The first drawer contained a multitude of cell phones. All their backs had been opened with their batteries and SIM cards removed. I now directed my attention to the next drawer. Its insides was filled with nothing but wallets and women's purses. What the fuck?
Exactly,
Kevin proclaimed.
What the fuck? This is like serial killer shit, Chris. I'm talking like Jeffrey Dahmer.
I was pulling several of the wallets and purses from the drawer and opening them. Neither of them contained any cash or credit cards, pictures, and especially driver's licenses. It's like anything connecting these items to someone has been removed, I muttered as my thoughts drifted back to the peculiar-looking bone I had spotted while walking to the house. I lifted my gaze from the wallets and came upon an old framed photo sitting atop the dresser. I reached out and took it in my hands. It was a faded color photo of two men with their arms draped over the other's shoulder. One was in a military uniform and the other was a younger-looking Werner. I handed the picture to Kevin.
This is Werner's house. I should have guessed by the way he just casually walked in the front door. We need to get the fuck out of here, ASAP.
I shushed him with a gesture of my hand and closed the dresser. Keep it down. We can't let him know we know. Hopefully he's still out getting wood. Let's grab Martin and get out of here. Werner said the next group of homes were like, 4 or 5 miles from here, right? Let's go. Kevin tossed the picture on the pile of clothing and we scurried from the room. It wasn't until we descended the stairs that we found Martin was no longer asleep in the chair. Martin was no longer in the room.
Martin,
Kevin hissed as he scanned the room.
He must have gone out to take a piss.
No, I said in a dead tone. He didn't.
What do you mean?
Kevin turned to me as I stood stupefied, pointing to the chair where Martin had just been seated. The seat was covered in fresh blood. It soaked into the plush material with heavy splashes on the surrounding floor. On the floor, smeared puddles stretched away from the chair and into the next room, indicating Martin's body had been dragged away, the heel marks of his hiker boots leaving a distinct trail. All I could do was stare at the unexpected bloodshed unmoving. I had never seen so much blood in my life. Kevin, however, was frantically going through the contents of his backpack. Returning to my side, he brandished a black handgun. The sight caused me to redirect my attention. What the?
Did you really think I would go hiking out in the middle of nowhere without this?
Kevin said between clenched teeth as he held the gun up.
That's how horror movies start. Now let's go find Martin.
With Kevin leading the way, we followed the blood trail and crept into the next room, which was a kitchen. The kitchen was as equally dark as the rest of the house, and we found the path of smeared crimson had turned sharply into an open doorway. Kevin stepped toward the door and peered into the darkness beyond it. I realized I had backed away from the door and was up against the kitchen sink.
It's a basement,
Kevin stated, keeping his distance from the threshold as he gazed down. I can't go down there, I muttered. I can't. Let's go.
Are you serious? Stop being a pussy and man up. Martin's down there.
I could only shake my head. Though I had no reasonable argument to back up my numbing fear, I knew there was only death beyond that door, and no words in the English language would summon any form of courage from within me.
Unbelievable,
Kevin said frustratingly as he turned toward me. His back was to the basement doorway.
At least grab one of the battle lanterns from your pack and I'll...
His words stopped abruptly as his face grimaced in pain. From the darkness behind him, Werner's face emerged as he wrapped an arm around Kevin's neck and rapidly thrust the knife he held into Kevin's lower back 3 more times, before finally tossing him to the kitchen's linoleum floor. Kevin landed with a hard thud and moaned. Werner was now stepping from the shadows of the basement. Speckles of blood dotted his face and beard. The front of his shirt was stained red. In his one hand, he clutched a large bowie knife. He approached me in slow, careful steps, and from the cunning look in his eyes and satisfying grin, it was obviously apparent that he knew I would not put up any fight and be easy pickings. To my misfortune, he was absolutely right. I remained frightfully rigid as he stepped closer. I prayed it would be quick.
Ah!
The room suddenly erupted in an explosive sound as Kevin fired the handgun. A round struck Werner in the back of his thigh, spinning him around. The second shot hit him in the abdomen, doubling him over and causing the knife to fall from his hand. Off-balanced, he limped a few steps, then also fell to the floor. I made my way quickly to Kevin. His face was pale and covered in perspiration as he lay curled up in a pool of his own blood. "What can I do?" I frantically asked.
Tie that fucker up,
he said between gasping breaths.
Take that knife away, too.
Standing up, I kicked the knife away from Werner's reach, sending it sliding to the other end of the kitchen. I then grabbed Werner by the collar of his shirt and dragged his balled-up form into the living room. He groaned in pain as I pulled him across the floor.
I have some nylon cord in my backpack,
Kevin weakly called from the kitchen.
Tie him up. We'll make him tell us where Martin is.
Where this newly gained composure and fortitude came from, I did not know. Yet I found myself taking charge of the most unexpected and horrifying experience in my life. As instructed, I searched Kevin's pack until I came across a few rolls of the cord. Without hesitation, I unwound it and began securing Werner's ankles.
You think this is going to do anything?
Werner spat, the stomach wound keeping him balled in the fetal position as I worked on tying his legs.
This doesn't change shit. Why the hell did you kill Martin? Why? What the hell did we ever do to you?
I cried as I felt my strength waning. Tears were welling up in my eyes as I pictured Martin sleeping peacefully in that bug-filled chair, not knowing what fate was about to deal him.
I don't enjoy doing it. But if I don't take care of them, who will, huh? You?
I finished securing the knot, then stood up.
What the hell are you talking about? He wasn't always like this, you know. It's not his fault he's like this.
Werner painfully shifted himself on the floor.
That damn war did it to him.
I now recalled the picture upstairs.
The man in the picture? You know then. About my brother? Robert was a good man.
My fear was now partially giving way to sheer curiosity. Either Werner was batshit crazy, or there was more to what was going on here.
What about your brother? Iraq. That's what happened to him. They did that to him. Damn Arabs got a hold of him. The army said he was a POW, and that they had beaten him, tortured him. But that wasn't enough. No, that wasn't enough.
His voice trailed. I don't understand.
They changed him. Did something to him. Something evil. They placed a curse on Robert. He was never the same once he came back.
Werner continued more calmly.
The government gave us all the bad news a week before he came home. Even when I told them he wasn't right and shouldn't be moved, they didn't want to hear that. I couldn't see it right away, but his wife and kids knew. They sensed it right from the get-go. I just thought it was from being captured over there. Then he began to change. Not just mentally, but physically. He stopped eating. His skin got sickly pale. and his hair fell out in clumps. He looked more dead than alive. I saw a bone, a human bone, in the street, I blurted out.
Werner sighed deeply.
Oh, they'll only eat dead meat, and they don't care where it comes from. He's my brother. I couldn't abandon him or his family like the government did to this town, or the army did to him.
I don't...
What they did to him over there infected his family. They not only cursed him, but it passed to his family too. Turned them all into monsters. A bunch of atrocities living in the basements of these old houses, eating whoever I can bring them.
Basements? I repeated quietly and turned toward the kitchen, shamefully forgetting everything that had just happened temporarily. Kevin was gone, and like Martin, all that remained was a blood trail where he had been dragged away to the basement while my back was turned.
I had to kill them,
Werner explained from behind me.
They're pretty much dead now, so all they can eat is the dead. They won't touch anything alive. Ghouls! Those bastards turned them all into ghouls!
Just then I saw that Kevin's gun had been left behind and still sat in a puddle of his own blood on the floor. I moved into the kitchen and was preparing to pull it from the blood when a noise came from the basement. I turned slowly and saw what I wish I hadn't. It was crouched on the topmost step into the cellar, a naked, emaciated being of pale, rubbery skin. More skeleton than flesh. The apparent necrosis to his creature had rendered it hairless, with exposed muscle tissue and blistering sores. Its skull-like features was without a nose or ears. Its eyes were tiny red orbs in its sunken sockets. Small canine teeth lined its blackened gums as it salivated. I found myself frozen. It then crept further from the door's threshold. Despite the lack of light, I could now see it in more grotesque detail. Tiny black flies crawled about its face and body, greedily feasting on the decomposed tissue. A horrid stench surrounded the creature that immediately initiated a wave of nausea in my stomach. It was at this point that I noticed a pair of dog tags dangling from a thin stainless steel chain around its gaunt neck. It was Robert. From behind him, two more pairs of those luminous red eyes appeared over his shoulders. He and his family were preparing to come out. Without conscious effort, my mind overrode its body, and in a fight-or-flee option, I turned and ran from the kitchen. As I fled through the living room past Werner, he shouted for me to return, but I was already out the door and sprinting off the porch. At that moment, my body felt as though it were in athletic form, as I ran with ease past the rows of houses and down the weed-plagued street until I reached its end. At the end of the road, a chain had been drawn across its path, blocking admittance. A sign hung from the chain's center, but I didn't linger to read it as I continued onto a main double-lined road that connected and kept running. I would imagine it was just another government no trespassing warning. The sun had sunk from view and given way to the growing shadows of night when I finally reached the first house I came upon. Its yellow front porch light had beckoned in the distance. I collapsed from exhaustion on its porch before I was discovered.
I appreciate you returning with us,
the deputy in the front passenger seat said as he twisted and looked back at me seated in the back of the patrol car. I only nodded. During my statement of what happened at the house, I left out no detail apart from what I witnessed crawling from the basement. I saw no reason to include an insane declaration about flesh-eating monsters. I wasn't entirely sure if what I had seen truly existed at this point, Plus, the mentioning of monsters would have discredited my story immediately.
If what you say is true about this guy Werner killing folks up there, then it'll explain a whole hell of a lot,
the deputy driving said.
There's been quite a few missing persons reported in the county.
There was more than quite a few, I said plainly. Once we reached the chained-off section of the street, I took notice of the street sign on the corner, DeVault Street. The deputy from the passenger side exited the vehicle and used the key to unlock the chain, allowing the car to pass through. I had thought that the street was eerie enough in the broad daylight, but now, veiled in darkness and with the absence of street lights, it was terrifying. Using the car's mounted searchlight, they identified the 86 on the mailbox and pulled the car up on the lawn facing the front door. The headlights' illumination basked in the front of the house in light. The front door was closed.
This is J13, the station. We just arrived up at the house, preparing to enter. Stand by,
the driver said into the vehicle's radio.
Now just sit tight,
the passenger said as he was exiting the car.
We're just going to take a look around. You said he took them into the basement?
I again only nodded. Once they were both out of the car, I watched them draw their weapons, remove their flashlights, and climb the porch steps, then cautiously enter the house, leaving the front door opened. Once they had disappeared into the house, I found myself very much alone and scared. I started throwing my gaze back and forth from the windows at my side. Outside the display of the car's exterior lights, the neighborhood was pitch black. It was then that I realized they locked me inside the car. Seated behind the cage and without door or window handles, my fear mounted. I waited for what seemed like an eternity, watching a mist roll in from the surrounding woods, and listening to the inaudible banter on the police radio. Suddenly, a series of gunshots rang out from somewhere inside the house, jolting my already highly strung nerves. I pushed myself up against the cage and stared at the open door and front porch. The silence that followed was equally frightening. Without warning, one deputy emerged from the doorway, holding onto the doorframe for support. His uniform shirt was torn in several places and streams of blood trickled from his head and into his face. I gripped the cage tightly, wishing I could intervene and feeling helplessly trapped. The deputy stumbled forward, making his way down the steps when Werner stepped from the house. White, blood-stained strips of bedsheets were wrapped around his injured thigh and waist. He limped behind the deputy and lifted his arm, pointing a handgun at the back of the dazed officer's head. With a pull of the trigger, the front of the man's head exploded, sending pieces of bone, blood, and brain to rain down on the car's hood. The deputy collapsed in a lifeless heap. Werner paused briefly on the porch, exposed in the headlights, before he shielded his eyes and looked at the car. Movement in my peripheral vision caught my attention. I looked to my right and saw that a black silhouette was standing not far from the car. Its red eyes dominated in the darkness. I flinched as Werner fired the gun again and blew out both headlights, throwing the scene into blackness, removing the bright deterrent which those cadaverous things detested. With the lights now gone, more shrouded figures scrambled from the house, moving on all four limbs. They were at the dead deputy's body instantly. Before I could back away from the cage, I had been spotted as Werner limped down the steps. He whistled loudly through blood-caked fingers and pointed at me.
I see you, boy. You miss us?
I turned in my seat and saw that the figure was now directly at the window. I could make out the faint glint of the dog tags around its neck. It was Robert.
Bring him out, Bobby,
yelled Werner as he descended the porch stairs. Robert's infected family members were dragging the dead deputy back into the house.
You decided to bring the law up here, boy?
Werner shouted angrily as he neared the car.
You're fucking with me and my family now.
The car door swung open and the thing was reaching in and pulling me harshly from the car. I screamed as my hands found no grip to anchor me and was easily hauled out and tossed on the lawn. Before I could react, Werner fired the gun twice, striking me in my back, knocking the breath out of me. I felt one round pierce my lungs as I laid on my stomach, incapacitated in the tall grass. Werner used his foot to roll me over onto my back. I found myself gazing up at the clear night sky and quarter moon. Robert was violently tearing my clothes from me with clawed hands. The stench from his decayed body was overwhelming. From the house, I could hear the others returning, scurrying heavily down the porch stairs.
I can't believe you had the balls to come back here. You were home free, boy. Now look at you,
Werner said as he stepped near me. With my clothing torn to shreds and removed, I laid there naked and dying, my breathing coming in labored, painful gasps. I coughed up a spittle of blood and felt it rain on my face.
Yeah, you're as good as gone now. Sounds like I hit a lung,
Werner commented with assurance.
If it makes you feel any better, boy, I'll be right here with you when you die, making sure they pick your bones clean.
His words were distorted, and my vision blurred and faded as my life continued pouring freely onto the lawn. My last breath had barely escaped my lips when the hideous, ghoulish beings, who were once as human as I, began ripping into me, feasting on my dead body with an insatiable hunger. I felt no pain at that point. My final memory of the heavenly clear night sky and its countless array of stars, orchestrated with distant sounds of snapping bones and rending flesh.
Chapter 1. Almost Free. Tucker Correctional Unit, Pine Bluff, Arkansas. August 15, 1995, 3:55 a.m. Central Daylight Time. Dan Kincaid stifled a deep sigh, concerned any noise would roust his slumbering cellmates. His entire body ached from the vicious brawl hours before. He lacked the strength to withstand another, so keeping quiet was a must. Rather than think about the beating, he sought out images of his wedding day. They filtered through his mind in sporadic jerks. Closing his eyes, he wished for sleep, yet was too keyed up, sore, and wary to drift off to La La Land. This year would have been, what, our 12th anniversary? Damn, I've lost so much inside these walls, including the concept of time. I can't seem to remember anything of importance any longer. Stop stressing. In less than 4 hours, I'll be a free man. No more foul food, sexually deviant cellmates, or mistreatment by the gorillas masquerading as guards. No more confinement like a mangy dog at the pound. Almost free. Kara's face the day they married swam behind his eyes. Bland, boring features plastered with a huge, goofy grin. A thick waist and chunky thighs hidden by an enormous spray of red and white lilies. The ceremony and reception had been a typical 80s wedding. An opulent, over-the-top extravaganza full of flowing drinks, succulent food, and dancing until the wee hours of the morning, all funded courtesy of her well-to-do parents. No expense had been spared for the only child of Roger and Anita Crow, which is exactly why Dan asked for Kara's hand in marriage after the stick turned blue. He knew the second they met, she was the golden ticket to financial freedom. The image shifted, replaced by the one of her destroyed, bloodied face, matted blonde hair, and unmoving body splayed out on the floor of their garage less than 2 years later. That was the night his life was supposed to begin after hers ended. Anger sparked to life. Clenching his fists in the darkness, he checked himself. Now was not the time nor place to unleash years of pent-up rage. The sweet release of raw fury would come later. Reliving the memories was painful, yet certainly better than staring at the gray-stained concrete or the ever-present bugs fond of skittering across the floors and walls in search of a snack. Shifting his body on the uncomfortable mattress, mindful of the injuries to his face, his thoughts roamed back to the sweltering summer evening of 1985. A dark, sinister grin graced his swollen lips. "I'm coming for what's mine. Dad always said a real man finishes what he starts, and I am my father's son." Chapter 2. A New Beginning. Outskirts of Perla, Arkansas. August 15, 1995, 10:55 a.m. Central Daylight Time. When Dan's feet touched the ground outside the security gates for the first time over 3,650 days, euphoria flooded through his chest. Upon sliding into the cool interior of Theo, Montgomery's fancy pants BMW, inhaling the luxurious scent of expensive leather and cologne, a wave of giddiness made him smile. The unfamiliar emotions switched over to irritation while staring out the window as he listened to his attorney prattle on about rules, responsibilities, and meetings with a parole officer. When they stopped at the DMV in Malvern to renew Dan's driver's license, an overwhelming sense of panic hit him. Hard. Would he be forced to explain in front of all the staff and impatient customers why his license expired, or the bruises and cuts on his face? What if someone recognized him, pointed fingers while running away in fear? How would he handle someone hurling accusations about the dastardly crime he committed in 1985? What if he snapped and did something stupid to send him back to the hell known as Tucker? The gut-burning angst turned out to be a waste of time. The DMV had no customers. None of the staffers looked familiar. The woman behind the counter didn't appear fazed in the least by the request for a new license, nor bat an eye while taking his picture or ask about the injuries. For the past 20 minutes, they had ridden in silence. Unfamiliar scenery whizzed by in a blur. Dan didn't recognize his old stomping grounds. Back in 1985, Malvern was a blip on the map, a population less than 5,000. Now new buildings, wider streets, heavier traffic, vast suburban sprawl, and an updated sign noting the population at 25,000 made him feel like a lone traveler reawakening in a foreign land. Rambling thoughts buzzed around inside his head. How would he find a job, afford a vehicle to get to and fro, or adapt back into society? Trapped in a loop of worry, he swallowed hard, glancing over at Theo. The loyal attorney had been the one and only constant presence in his life for the past 6 years after Dan's previous lawyer died. They had known each other since childhood, yet weren't friends. He knew the legal beagle's mannerisms and sensed something was on his mind he didn't know how to broach. The car slowed. Theo turned onto a road Dan did recognize. Ridgeview Circle. His stomach flip-flopped. Burning gastric juices jolted up his esophagus. The last time he had been down the bumpy pavement, he had been in handcuffs and stuffed into the back seat of a country cruiser. Honed instincts from years behind bars lit up, flushing his system with a rush of adrenaline. The fight-or-flight response went into overdrive. He sensed a trap. Theo wasn't a large man, maybe 150 pounds soaking wet and barely 5 feet 7 inches. Soft, dainty hands of a man accustomed to using his brain and not brawn. Dan could overpower him easily. The ability to sense danger kept Dan's 5'10" 10-inch frame mostly free from injury during his decade-long stint inside Tucker. Mostly. Fighting the urge to shudder as a barrage of unwanted, ingrained memories of all the times he suffered injuries, both at Tucker by bigger, meaner, nastier inmates, and the ones inflicted upon him while living in his childhood home, he lowered his voice. "What are we doing here, Theo?" "Reintroducing you to society." "I haven't spoken to my old man since I got sent away. I'm not ready to dive into the hornet's nest of our sour relationship. I've only been out of the can a few hours. I need time to reassimilate. Theo put the car in park, exited, and popped the trunk. Producing the small suitcase with Dan's meager belongings from the prison, he motioned toward the house. Raising his eyebrows, Dan said nothing while stepping out of the car. His body tensed, bracing for the ensuing fisticuffs with his mean-as-fuck sperm donor. What kind of twisted plan did the two cook up? A welcome home party straight from the bowels of hell? Keeping enough distance to form a counterattack or bolt into the woods should the need arise, he watched Theo walk over to the crumbling front porch and set the suitcase on the top step. "Sit. Enjoy your freedom, my friend. Hell, take off your shoes. Run your toes through the sparse grass and dirt of your roots. Anything is better than the rough concrete floors of prison, right?" Hackles still on alert, Dan focused on the front door. A foreboding sensation crawled up his back while waiting for it to open and the appearance of his father. "Thanks, but I'll pass." "Why are we here, not in Malvern? Like I said before, I'm not ready for a confrontation with Daddy dearest. Besides, we're miles away from the halfway house. You said I'm supposed to be there at 11 a.m. for check-in. What happens if I'm late?" Theo smiled, extending his arms like a game show host announcing a prize. "This is your home now, Dan." "Come again?" Theo produced a key from his front pocket. "Today's a mixture of good news and bad news. Which do you want first?" The squawk of a lone raven from the dilapidated eaves made Dan jump. His mother was fond of saying the big birds were dark omens. "Bad. Just spit it out. I don't need a long-winded story. Just the cold facts." "As you wish. Your father passed away." "He did? When?" 2 weeks ago. I kept tabs on him over the years after your mom died of cancer. His health declined quickly during the last 7 months, you know. Possibly an early onset of dementia. I hoped the news would revive his spirits. I was wrong. There was a fire in the barn. He didn't make it out in time. His, cremains are at Eternal Slumber Acres." Mind spinning, Dan wiped rivulets of sweat from his brow. "What's the good news?" "He left everything to you. The house, a new truck, and 2 bank accounts at Bear State Bank." Slipping 2 thin cards from his wallet, Theo passed them over. Dan gaped at them. Since when did Bear State Bank offer credit cards? How am I supposed to pay for any outstanding balance or a truck payment without a job? Theo chuckled, exposing a set of perfectly straight, bright white teeth. "These are debit cards." "Huh?" "They work just like a credit card, but with no interest. Funds come straight out of the bank account. Think of it as an electronic check. They were in the back of the freezer, of all places. You'll need to destroy the ones with your dad's name. Keep yours. Your dad already set up the PIN codes. They are on the back of each card. I checked the land records. He recorded a beneficiary deed for the house and acreage over to you the morning before he died." "Beneficiary deed? Non-lawyer lingo, please." "The property remained under his ownership until his death and then passed directly to you. No probate will be necessary since the bank accounts were in joint names. Now, they are yours. I'll take care of the paperwork to retitle the truck into your name. Cost will be $50. It's a brand new Chevy, and he paid for it in cash, so you're free and clear. She's in the garage underneath a tarp." Stunned by the crazy turn of events, surprised his tightwad father splurged on a new vehicle, Dan remained silent while absorbing the happy news. How much money was in the bank account? Would it be enough to make much-needed repairs on the dump? He wanted to dance a jig at the revelation the old bastard bit the big one, yet he decided to wait until alone to celebrate. Theo straightened his tie while clearing his throat. "I know he never came to visit you, but maybe this was his way of letting you know he loved and cared for you." "Yeah, I'm sure that's it," Dan snorted while recalling painful memories of his youth. How many times did his father's beefy fists land punch after punch on his young body for one minor infraction or another? Way too many to keep count. For years, no one, except his petrified mouse of a mother, knew the true nature of the monster known to others as happy-go-lucky auto mechanic Arthur Kincaid. His mother insisted the dark secret be unveiled during Dan's trial. Sebastian Donnelly, his defense attorney at the time and Theo's mentor and former partner, agreed and used the abuse as a defense, convincing the jury Dan suffered a violent upbringing and simply continued the cycle with his wife after a wicked argument. Dan glanced around the unkempt 10 acres. All the legal mumbo-jumbo made his head spin. Was all this really his now? Did the cosmos finally cut him a break? A shadow of a smile curled his lips upward. The smile vanished as his gaze landed on the back acreage. For a split second, he swore the old man stood by the fence, sleeves rolled up, muscles bulging, face contorted in rage. The sour aroma of stale whiskey filled the air. The booming voice of his father sent ripples of goosebumps up and down his entire body. "Come here, boy. Time to teach you a lesson. I gotta finish what I started." Willing the hallucination to disappear, Dan diverted his gaze, settling it on the charred remnants of the barn. He fought to retain control of his emotions and rein his thoughts back to reality rather than succumb to utter nonsense. Ignore the ghosts of the past. The old man's a putrid corpse now. He's also the reason you're free. Dan's head whipped around. Say what? He came to the parole hearing, begging for you to be released. Bullshit. On my honor as an officer of the court, I'm telling the truth. Perhaps he sensed his time was short. Facing death changes the hearts of even the darkest of souls. Maybe, but the key word there is heart. That son of a bitch didn't have one. Dan spit onto the dry ground. So, what about the halfway house? The sound of crunching gravel made both turn their heads. A tan Aries K stopped behind Theo's car. A woman with long legs, jet black hair, and enormous sunglasses sauntered their way. Her brown pantsuit fit a curvaceous body like a second skin. He hadn't set eyes on a decent-looking woman in years. He fought the urge to let out an appreciative whistle. Theo glanced at his watch while whispering, "That's Gina Renfro, your probation officer. Woman's always right on time. I pled your case with her after finding out about your dad's passing. I'll let her tell you about the halfway house." Gina grimaced at Theo. Dan surmised she overheard the whispered words. Removing a card from her purse, she set it on the railing. The sweet scents of lilacs and jasmine filled his nostrils. "Mr. Kincaid, I assume Mr. Montgomery informed you of who I am?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good. You have him to thank for your new living arrangements. He's quite persuasive." She paused while taking in the entire area. "As long as you stay out of trouble, which of course includes no drugs, booze, overnight female guests, arrestable offenses, find gainful employment, attend your bi-monthly meetings with me at my office, and pass random drug tests, you may reside here, unsupervised." Dan's mouth dropped open. "No shit?" Gina gave a curt nod. "I'll need to inspect the residence before I leave to ensure no prohibited items are inside the house." I haven't been inside yet. I have no idea what's in there. Don't hold me accountable for what my father left behind." "I took the liberty of having the house cleaned by my housekeeper, Constance," Theo interjected, leading the way up to the front door. "It was a disaster area. The firearms were removed. We tossed most of the junk, including all the furniture, so what's in there came from goodwill. Constance is a dandy. Very thorough. The fridge and pantry are stocked with food, and she removed all the liquor." Eyebrows raised in doubt, Gina motioned for Theo to open the door, keeping her attention focused on the house. The sense of bleach and pine cleaner assaulted Dan's nose, immediately reminding him of prison. The underlying stench of his father remained despite the cleaning. Unsure of his reaction upon setting foot inside for the first time in over a decade, he hung back, watching the duo go from room to room. Gina's heels clacked across the old linoleum and stained hardwood with each purposeful step. He hoped the maid truly did perform a thorough cleaning and removed all the bottles of Johnny Walker his father used to hide throughout the house. In minutes they returned. Gina paused at the bottom of the steps. "Your first appointment is Tuesday at 9 a.m. Do not be late, Mr. Kincaid. The address is on my card, along with my beeper and office number. Excuses are not tolerated. Abide by the rules. All it takes to send you back to Tucker for the remainder of your sentence is one infraction. Understood?" Dan envisioned slapping the smirk off her pretty face. "Yes, ma'am." Waiting until the car disappeared around the bend of the road, he studied Theo. "Why'd you do all this? It's not like I was innocent and got framed. You read the case file and know I did it." "I'm aware. Just as I'm aware you made a mistake during a fit of uncontrollable rage after a triggering argument. You paid your debt to society and are a reformed man. I see transformation, and most importantly, so did the parole board. I'm the closest person to family you have left now, so what kind of attorney would I be if I didn't offer a solid foundation for you to walk down on this new path of life?" Dan pondered the words, yet remained quiet. Was this really happening, or just a vivid hallucination? "There's no one left to condemn you any longer, Dan. Reflecting on the past is a waste of time. Concentrate on building a better present and future. You've been granted a chance to start fresh. Take it and run." Pulling out a cigarette from his pocket, Dan lit up, inhaling long and deep. "I doubt Kara would agree with your statement. She'll find out soon enough where I'm living. When she does, I promise you she'll do everything in her power to make life outside of prison miserable for me." "No, she won't. Trust me." "Trust you? I trust nobody." Blowing out a plume of smoke into the damp, humid air, Dan let down his guard a fraction. 10 years of keeping my ass clamped tight and a head on a rotating swivel, watching my back wipe that word right out of my vocabulary. Think what you like about the world at large, Dan, but not me. Walking back toward the BMW, Theo shook his head. "You must trust someone sometime, or else that swivel head of yours will snap one day. Oh, by the way, the truck key is on the counter." "Thanks. You have nothing to worry about. Kara died last month. Hit and run. Most likely a drunk driver." "Why didn't you tell me?" Theo shrugged his shoulders. "You aren't the only client I have, Dan." "Holy shit. I really am free?" "Only if you embrace your freedom. Don't allow the past to trap you inside the prison of your mind. Oh, and one more thing." "What?" "Come by the office on Friday, say around 10. I have plenty of odd jobs for you to do until you can find permanent employment. With your reputation and record, it'll take time." Theo waved, hopped into the driver's seat, and sped off down the gravel road. Waiting until the cloud of dust settled, Dan kicked off his shoes before ambling over to the grass. Scrunching his toes into the blades felt glorious. He stopped after a few seconds when the raven screeched again, drawing his attention toward the house. The place that frightened him almost as much as the 8x8 prison cell. Could he do it? Could he live inside his childhood home? Face the fears of his past? Only one way to find out. Snatching his shoes and the key from atop the suitcase, he steeled his resolve. Upon entering, a wave of painful, terrifying memories slammed into his mind so hard it was as though his father's fist smacked into his brain. Taking a deep breath, he lit up another smoke, a habit his father abhorred. Seeing the place stripped of all mementos and with new furnishings was strange yet fascinating. "That's the last time you'll hurt me again, you piece of shit. I'm glad you're dead." Save me the trouble of taking you out myself. With purposeful strides, he headed to the pantry. Opening the cabinet door, he felt around for the hidden handle. A quiet chuckle escaped his cracked lips while pulling out 2 dusty bottles full of Johnny Walker. Hello, boys. Guess this isn't such a bad welcome home party after all. Snatching a bag of chips and the closest bottle, he headed back out to the porch. After removing the lid, he held the whiskey toward the sky. To freedom! He took a gulp, winced, belched, and laughed. To Mom! I'm sorry you married such an asshole. At least you're safe now while he rots in hell. Another long swig. The amber liquid burned a trail all the way to his gut. To no longer fearing my old man. Another swig, followed by a handful of chips. To sleeping alone in a real bed, with no fear. He chugged again. Lighting a smoke, he squinted while staring out into the overgrown field. Maybe Theo's right. Let go of the past. Concentrate on the future. It sure isn't what I had in mind when I left prison earlier. Not even in my wildest dreams. And I don't have to dirty up my hands to get what's mine. The trill of the house phone made him jump. He stood, fought off the rush of dizziness, and ambled inside. It took him a few seconds to locate the cordless phone, which was crammed in between the couch cushions. Hello? Nothing but dial tone. Ha! If you were looking for Arthur Kincaid, you're shit out of luck. Ding dong, the dick is dead. Dan laughed so hard he nearly fell while making his way back outside. Taking another drink, the relaxing effects of the scotch made his chest warm. Chikara, glad I don't have to finish what I started. You'd better still have the safe, and my share of the spoils. As the trill of cicadas filled the sweltering afternoon, Dan continued to drink, laughing until tears came at all the terrible twists and turns of his life during his 35 years on the planet. Chapter 3. Nightmares of the Past. Outskirts of Perla, Arkansas. August 16, 1995, 1:55 a.m. Central Daylight Time. From his hidden perch in the corner, Dan's heart rate spiked while watching Kara open the door from the kitchen into the garage. Just as he planned, she went straight to the metal door, examining it with a confused look, trying to decipher why a long piece of gray metal was shoved into the housing. Sweat trickled down his forehead into his eyes. It was time to get the party started. In a flash, and before Kara's pea-brain registered any sound, he attacked. His vision blurred as uncontrollable rage guided his mind and body. In minutes, the vicious onslaught was over. Taking a deep breath, instinctively wrinkling his nose at the pungent smell of her rancid blood, he smiled. Kara's body was face down on the cold concrete floor, unmoving, her thick honey-colored hair a congealed mass of knots. Her right arm was above her head, resting at an unnatural, awkward angle. Her work clothes were soaked in red. The crimson life force pooled around her head, forming a huge kidney-shaped glob. Pieces of her hair, with blood as the glue, stuck to the floor and the metal garage door. About 3 feet from her head, a small white object glinted under the glare of the single overhead light bulb. He suppressed a dark, evil chuckle. It was one of Kara's teeth. Her breath came in stuttered, small gasps. She only had minutes left. Standing, careful not to leave any footprints in the blood, he pulled the attic stairs down to give the impression of an accidental fall. Satisfied with his handiwork, he removed the metal bar lodged in the door and exited the area in the exact same way he entered it earlier, through the small window in the back, and then disappeared into the night. He made it less than a mile before the high-pitched wail of emergency vehicles pierced the stillness of the night. Running faster, pushing his aching muscles past the point of exhaustion, he zigzagged through the woods, guided by the full moon's radiant beams, until arriving at the berry patch at the edge of his parents' property. In a panic, he shed the bloodied clothes and boots stained with his wife's blood, retrieving the fresh sets he placed in a large garbage bag earlier by the fence line. Just as he slid on the left boot, his mother's scream of anguish tore through his core. "Dan would never do such a thing. You leave my boy alone. He loves his wife. Why would he hurt her?" Dropping the blood-spattered evidence into the bag, he snatched up several large rocks, tossing them inside. Slinging it over his shoulder, he sprinted toward the pond. He dove in, kicking his feet with all his might until hitting the bottom. Feeling around in the dark, his fingers grazed an old stump. Once securing the bag, he prayed the rocks were heavy enough for it to stay hidden in case it pulled away from the old wet tree. He had to get another breath. His lungs screamed for air. As his head broke the surface, the sound of a dog's menacing growl from his right made his heart flutter. It was followed by bright flashlight beams blasting into his face, temporarily blinding him. The splash of someone entering the water to his right barely registered before a strong arm wrapped around his throat, dragging him backward toward shore. "Move or even blink and he'll give Kubo the command to attack." The cop tossed Dan's soaking torso onto the shore. "He loves ripping holes in the torsos of monsters like you. You're under arrest for the attempted murder of your estranged wife, Kara Kincaid. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say..." Gasping for air, a scream trapped inside his parched throat, Dan fell, landing hard on his right shoulder. The vivid dream of the night he tried and nearly succeeded in killing Kara made his stomach revolt. Crawling over to the edge of the porch, he vomited, spewing potato chips and whiskey out like a yellow lava from a volcano. Screech! Glancing up, he spotted the raven on the porch railing. "Damn bird! Get lost!" Something sharp cut into his palm. He let out a low groan. Feeling around in the dark, he realized it was a large sliver of glass. The smell of whiskey hung heavy in the air. The bottle must have fallen from his hands and shattered upon impact with the hard wood. After wiping his mouth, he rose, heading to the kitchen to grab some water and search for something to stop the bleeding. He hoped Theo's cleaning lady left some bandages and peroxide. Flicking on the overhead light, something out of place on the fridge caught his eye. He peered closer. No freaking way. Stuck to the door with his mother's favorite magnet, "Bloom where God plants you," was Kara's wedding picture. Below that was the newspaper article from July 10, 1985, with his picture underneath the headline. "Jury sentences local man to 20 years for first-degree battery against his wife." Next to that was the obituary for Kara Renee Crow, dated July 4, 1995. The final edition was the 3-sentence obituary for his father. Clawing through the haze of alcohol clouding his mind, he knew the items weren't there before. Rage bubbled up from deep inside his chest. Someone had been in the house while he was passed out on the porch. Someone was playing dirty little tricks on him. A loud thump from behind and to the right caught his attention. Spinning around, he stared at the raven perched on the windowsill. "Just you wait until I get myself a gun. I'll blow your carcass to pieces, along with the asshole responsible for trying to freak me out." Returning to the porch, he stared at the shattered bottle of expensive whiskey. He needed to drink himself into a stupor so he could sleep without Kara's ghost pervading his dreams. It was time to open the other. Taking in a deep cleansing breath of the hot, humid night air, he scanned the woods, looking for any movement. The scent of honeysuckle and night jasmine tickled his nose, immediately reminding him of his horrendous childhood. "Screw this. I'm too drunk to whip anyone's ass." After locking the door, he staggered towards his old bedroom, making it 2 steps down the hallway before tripping over something heavy and hard. He stumbled, yet remained upright. What the fuck is this? Bending down, he picked up a thick black binder. It looked like a photo album, but he really couldn't tell in the dark. Upon entering his room, he turned on the light, mouth hanging ajar while flipping through the pages. It was full of trial transcripts. More specifically, the damning testimony of the physician who treated Kara at the hospital. "Died in a hit and run, my ass. Theo, you idiot. Kara pulled the wool right over your eyes. Oh, you want to play games, huh, my pathetic ex-wifey?" Dropping the binder onto the floor, he staggered down the hallway. "I'll show you, bitch. I'll show you how a man finishes what he starts." Pushing the front door open, he plowed right into a body. The impact knocked them both to the ground. He heard a sickening thud followed by a low moan. His anger peaked. It was a female. "I'm going to finish what I started, Kara. Squeeze the life right out of you." Spittle flew from his lips as his fingers latched around a slender throat already slick with blood. A flash of black hair caught his attention. "Miss Renfro?" She tried to scream, yet the pressure of his fingers cut off the flow of oxygen. Dumbfounded by her presence, Dan let go and rolled off of her before scrambling to his feet. "What in the hell? Why are you here? Are you in on this? Part of Kara's plan? You paged me. 911. Gina whispered while rubbing her throat. Her eyes widened in shock as she pointed behind him. "Look out!" Before Dan could spin around, pain exploded in the back of his head, sending him into a pit of ebony nothingness. "A decade of my life wasted while waiting for my love to regain the memories you erased. How's that fair, Dan? Where's the justice I deserve for my unending patience?" Groaning, head a vortex of pain and confusion, Dan fought to open his eyes. Strange, squishy footsteps drew closer. "There is no such thing as justice. Just ask Kara. The flimsy piece of paper issued by the court restraining you from contacting her during the divorce proceedings proved to be useless. And the law? Hell, old slick Sebastian used loopholes to persuade the jury you were sick and needed help. That's partly your mother's fault. I bet you didn't know she made a big spectacle at the office the day she hired him, stood at the front doorway and yelled out her demands, shrill voice carrying for blocks. The entire town had eyes and ears on the case, and she knew it. Sebastian didn't want his reputation shredded by having a client receive the death penalty. Ha! He even sought my counsel, asking my opinion on if he should play the abuse card. Of course I said yes. I needed you alive. That part was my fail-safe just in case Kara forgot the combination or died, both of which happened. Always have a backup plan, Dan. Always." A hot burst of fresh pain exploded in Dan's left cheek as Theo's foot connected. He moaned in agony. Sweat and blood streamed down his face as he finally managed, "Why, Theo?" "You seriously have the audacity to ask me why? Give me a fucking break, like you don't know." Another round of pain, this time from his crotch. Terror thrummed inside Dan's mind upon the realization his hands were bound. Damp cold seeped into his back. Despite the pain, he forced his eyes open, choking back a gasp. Even with one eye swollen shut, you still recognize where you are. Appropriate, don't you think? The garage floor of the house you once shared with my Kara. Dan's mind spun to process all the stimulation. My Kara? What the fuck is he talking about? Gaze scanning the area, his mouth went dry. Inches away from his body was Gina Renfro's. Even in the dim light, he could tell she was dead. Shifting his gaze upward, he noticed Theo wore gloves, his entire body covered in what looked like saran wrap. Oh shit, I'm in trouble. Theo crouched down, yanking a handful of hair with his glove-covered hand, forcing Dan to stare into his demented eyes. Dan had to keep him talking until he could figure out an escape plan. His throat burned and it was difficult to form words from his swollen lips. Blood seeped from his mouth. I don't... You ruined everything, idiot. All of our plans. I loved her. You what? My whole life, ever since first grade, Kara was my soulmate. Not yours, mine. She cared for me as a friend, but damn, she fell head over heels when pretty boy grease monkey Dan Kincaid, former star athlete and quintessential bad boy, looked her way when she came back from college. Bland, boring, nerdy me ceased to exist in her mind and heart. Your looks and charm overrode the dirt underneath your nails and blue-collar job. She could have continued the high society life with me as the wife of a lawyer, but no, you knocked her up. On purpose. Tell me I'm wrong. Swallowing hard, fearing the response to the answer, yet more afraid of getting caught in a lie, Dan nodded once, instantly recalling the night he poked holes in the condom. You aren't. Theo's features contorted into an angry sneer. I knew it. Kara adored you and was thrilled the child with your DNA grew inside her, despite the misgivings of her parents. I cannot begin to tell you how difficult it was for me to watch from afar as the woman I love carried the child of another and married such a worthless piece of trash. A loser, only after her for money. Theo let go and stood, pacing in small circles. Dan watched him pull something silver and shiny from his back pocket. Sweat and blood pooled around Dan's wrists, allowing him to slowly, steadily, twist his hands to loosen the bindings. Imagine my surprise when Roger Crow came to my house late one night, so drunk he could hardly stand. I found out then I wasn't the only man in town disturbed by Kara's life choices. Roger's conscience bothered him. Actually, I think he was more concerned about legal culpability, but that's just conjecture on my part. Anyway, he told me how the tainted fruit of your loins stopped growing inside his daughter's body after his decision. He actually used those words, tainted fruit. Roger was an odd duck. Dan's simmering anger bubbled dangerously close to the surface. He kept it in check. Are you saying he killed my baby? That's impossible. Kara tripped and fell down the stairs at her parents' house in her 6th month of pregnancy. Yes, from a loose step on their front porch, the one loosened by Roger. And please drop the act. You didn't give a damn about your offspring. Maniacal laughter filled the empty garage. And here you thought your dad was a monster. At least you saw his attacks coming and could prepare for the emotional and physical onslaught. Kara had no clue her father was just as devious. The entire conversation with him was surreal. Roger rambled on about how the intentional miscarriage was an act of kindness. He didn't want his precious daughter saddled with a child fathered by you. The second part of his plan was to convince Kara to divorce you. Dan continued to slowly wriggle his wrists. The right was almost free. She loved me too much to leave. I don't believe any of this. Roger Crow was a pompous asshole, but he loved Kara. You know the fine line between love and hate? It's easily crossed when proof of adultery stares you in the face. Dan's eyes bulged from shock. What are you saying? All it took for Roger to cross the line were some vivid Polaroids, discreetly snapped by and hand-delivered to him by yours truly, Kara's concerned childhood friend. You're nothing more than a slimy bottom feeder. I knew I felt someone following me around a few times. Theo's smile was straight out of a horror movie. Dark. Devious, twisted. I promise I had no idea Roger would cross over into the dark side. Believe me, I was shocked. The night of his confession, he cried like a baby, whining about how much he loved his little girl. I knew then Kara married a man just like her father. Cold, calculating, and evil, willing to do anything to get what he wants. She deserved better. She was a queen and should have been treated like one. I was her prince, her rescuer, swooping in on a white horse, ready to whisk her away from the men who treated her like garbage. So I told her the truth about the loss of the baby and her whore dog husband. I assumed she'd be so grateful she'd pack up and run away with me. Unfortunately, I was dead wrong. To my surprise and horror, she crossed the thin line, diving headfirst into hate, ultimately committing murder. Dan's right arm was millimeters away from freedom. The unanswered questions from the last few weeks prior to his attack on Kara finally became clear. Now I know why Kara watched me work on my truck and asked me so many questions. She tampered with the brakes on their car, causing their deaths, right? A shadow of compassion and concern danced across Theo's face as he nodded. Love and hate makes people do the strangest things, doesn't it? And money. Don't forget money, Dan hissed. So why all this? Why involve her? Theo glanced over at Gina's corpse. You must pay for your crimes. 10 years wasn't near enough. Everyone thinks you're a monster, and tonight proves they are correct. Not even 1 day out of prison and you murdered your parole officer after paging her in a drunken stupor. She showed up at your house. You attacked her when she wouldn't hop in the sack with you, panicked, drove her car here and came in search of the money stashed in the safe, intent on skipping town. The police will conclude she put a valiant fight and landed a mortal blow before succumbing to the injuries inflicted by you. Death is what you deserved originally for hurting my beloved, but the information inside your head kept you alive. Long enough for you to share with me. Again, always have a backup plan. You're certifiable. Theo brandished the syringe in front of Dan's face. We can do this the easy way with a stick and a sting, or we can go the violent route. Your choice. Dan's fingers slipped through the knot. His muscles tensed. You want the combination? Good luck. My lips are sealed. No way you're getting your filthy hands on what's left of Kara's inheritance. Knowing her spoiled ass, she probably spent it anyway. And all this was for nothing. You killed an innocent woman for nothing. For nothing? Theo yelled, face radiating crimson. The tip of the syringe was inches away from Dan's eyeball. I sat by and watched while a once vibrant, effervescent woman, full of vim and vigor and smart as a whip, withered down to an unrecognizable shadow of her former self. She never got over the shame and embarrassment for being duped into marriage and the deplorable action of her father. Heartache was permanently etched across her face. My Kara was once the life of the party and the girl everyone wanted as a friend. You destroyed those wonderful characteristics. Those amazing traits are embedded forever between the tiny cracks in the garage floor. She never spent 1 red cent of her inheritance because she locked it all up in the safe and forgot the combination after you bashed her skull on the floor multiple times. Now tell me the fucking numbers or I'll slice your junk off and shove the flesh down your throat. Dan's arms shot out from behind him. A loud crack filled the air. Theo's body flew backward into the wall. He sputtered and coughed up a huge dollop of blood as his torso crumpled to the floor. I can't move. Oh God, I can't feel my legs. You broke my back. Oh, that's too bad, Theo. But guess what? Not being able to feel any pain will be a blessing. Trust me. Whack, whack, whack. Like a deer caught in a spotlight, Dan froze in horror, stomach lurching at the disgusting sounds and terrifying visuals of wood connecting with flesh. The noise stopped. His frazzled brain finally recognized the face and voice of the man standing inches away, holding the blood-soaked bat. Dad? Howdy, son. Before Dan could blink, his father moved with lightning speed, smashing the bat into his right ankle. The bones shattered. Dan screamed in agony, wishing the house wasn't located in such a rural area. Give me the combination, boy, or the next whack will destroy your knee. Why, Daddy? Why? I'm your son. Snot and spittle flew from Dan's mouth. What did I ever do to deserve your hate? You lived after nearly killing your ma when coming out of her. You broke the only thing I ever loved. The cold, hateful response crushed Dan's spirit. Tears streamed down his face. You ran over Kara, didn't you? That's why you bought a new truck. Still a fool after all these years. No, I bought a new truck because I deserved one. You think I'm so stupid I'd use my own to kill someone? Dumbass. No wonder you got caught. I used the one Theo kept down in the deer woods, hot-wired it, and then took it for a spin. Right over Kara's back. A round of throaty cackles threw Dan's mind back into that of the terrified 6-year-old. I found out the little hussy's secret a few months ago because of him. Arthur motioned toward Theo's bleeding corpse. Boy had a bad habit of spilling his guts when full of moonshine, masquerading as sweet tea when he came by to check on me. One night he passed out after telling me things I shouldn't have heard, so I went and got the truck and paid my former daughter-in-law a visit. I tried to reason with the girl, offering to split her ill-gotten windfall 50-50. She kept beating me some bullshit about not remembering the numbers. Swore only one other person knew the combination. You. Hearing Kara's little bombshells when I decided to help you get out of prison early. Of course, doing so required Kara not attending the parole hearing as the poor distraught victim. I kept my eye on your legal counsel and knew he was up to something. He was so obsessed with Kara and lost his marbles after she died. He needed her money. Theo loved to gamble, lost his ass playing blackjack. Owed a chunk of change to some nasty thugs from Louisiana. Boy was a planner, that's for sure. Unfortunately for him, he was so focused on getting you out of prison and his hands on some cold cash, he didn't realize I watched his every move. Gotta hand it to the kid. The mind games he played on you tonight were epic. But book smarts and common sense are two very different skill sets. Dan felt something cool and slender against his leg. He knew immediately what it was. With slow, imperceptible movements, his fingers inched toward it. Whose body was in the rubble of the barn? Just some drunk I found passed out in Little Rock. Since the world at large thinks I'm dead, no one will come looking for me after finding this mess. I'm heading to the Caribbean. Always wanted to live on the beach. Question and answer time is over. Give me the numbers and I promise to end your suffering with one swing rather than hundreds. A guttural scream, born from the depths of his shattered soul, pierced the night air. Dan jammed the syringe into his thigh, pushing the plunger all the way down. Instant, burning pain tore up his leg. His chest tightened as his heart rate exploded. This time, murder isn't for money. It's for a reckoning. This time, you don't get to finish what you started. I do. No! The voice of his furious father was the last thing Dan Kincaid ever heard before succumbing to excruciating pain. His body convulsed on the cold concrete, stained with the blood of the guilty and the innocent. I sure hope you enjoyed tonight's story, Stained Concrete, written by Ashley Fontainne. Not only is this the first story for Fear from the Heartland, it's the first story of Ms. Fontainne to air on Chilling Tales for Dark Nights. Ashley Fontainne is an international best-selling author and has penned over 23 works in numerous genres. To find more of her excellent work, check out her website at ashleyfontaine.net. That's Ashley, ASHLEY, Fontaine, FONTAINNE.net. Or connect with Ashley on Facebook at ashley.fontaine.